What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty. Join my Discord if you want to chat and share your thoughts, the link is in the description. 4MB Chapter 101 Saiyan Bloodline Cheng Cheng was shocked when he saw the power of Shank's random punch. Good guy, just one punch as a turtle-style qigong? What effect would this have if it were a full blow? It seems that I still underestimated the fighting power of the 4 Emperors level experts. Seeing the people on the deck like this, Cheng Cheng looked calm, turned slightly sideways, and said with a smile. You don't have to be like this, I have already told you in advance, I am the eldest brother of Luffy and Ace. Whether it's Shank's kindness to Luffy or Ace's kindness, it's all worth what I do. You really don't need to thank me. There was still silence on the ship. Even after hearing what Cheng Cheng said, no one was willing to straighten up. After a long time, Shanks took the lead to straighten up his body, and the others followed suit. At this time, the eyes that looked at Cheng Cheng were full of enthusiasm and trust. Cheng Cheng. You will be the biggest benefactor of my red-haired pirates from now on. If you need any help from us, just ask. After Shanks stood up, he instantly became beaming and patted Cheng Cheng on the shoulder. Cheng Cheng was just about to say that he could handle many things now, and there was no need for their help, but suddenly he had an idea and said seriously, Shanks, I really want to ask you for help with something. Say it, as long as I can do it, I am obligated. Cheng Cheng said with a smile. You don't have to say it so absolutely, I don't ask for anything else. As long as you don't beat me after I say it. Brother Cheng Cheng. The red-haired voice stretched out, patted Cheng Cheng's shoulder hard, and said enthusiastically, don't say such hurtful words between us two brothers. You helped me recover my arm and have great kindness to me. Even if I can't do what you said, I won't be able to attack you. Everyone on the deck also smiled and said, no, little brother Cheng Cheng, you are asking on this sea, when did our red-haired pirates ever do anything to repay kindness with enmity? Our red-haired pirates have always valued friendship the most. Now you are the biggest benefactor to all of us, don't worry. Dad, don't worry, even if the captain wants to attack you, I will break my original oath and try my best to stop him. Fatty Lou, who was holding bones and meat at the side, said with a sincere expression. The people around burst into laughter again. Fatty Lou all congratulated him, you really have a good young father. Advertisement. Fatty Lou raised his head, his face full of pride. Uncle Fatty, stop joking. I'm not a Whitebeard. If you call me daddy, you'll call me old. People who don't know think I'm an old man who has lived for hundreds of years. Cheng Cheng turned over. He rolled his eyes and said helplessly. Everyone laughed again, and the atmosphere was harmonious. Then Cheng Cheng looked at the red-haired man and said, since you all promised this, then I will say it? Shanks nodded and said loudly, speak confidently and boldly. How about introducing your daughter to me? Cheng Cheng whispered tentatively. As soon as he finished speaking, Shanks, who was smiling all over his face, immediately put away his smile, and looked at Cheng Cheng inch by inch with cold eyes, scanning him from head to toe indifferently. His right hand slowly reached out to the famous sword Griffin slung across his waist, and he raised it slightly between his thumbs. The sword was unsheathed and was 1 finger long, revealing an icy cold light. Everyone around him was too embarrassed to show his anger. They looked at Cheng Cheng with not only pity but also admiration. The fat man who called Cheng Cheng dad looked up at the sky in confusion, and at the same time blocked his eyes with his big flesh and bones. Cheng Cheng instantly felt a surge of pressure that was so powerful that it was suffocating, as if his whole body was plunged into the cold sea water, and his body unconsciously took a step back. Only then did Shanks regain his full smile. He let go of Griffin with his right hand, put his arm around Cheng Cheng's shoulders and laughed. We two brothers will never come home until we're drunk today. After a while, Beckman nodded with deep understanding and looked at Cheng Cheng with a little more admiration. Shanks gritted his teeth and said word by word, here, change, one. Cheng Cheng saw how skillfully they cooperated and knew that these people must have been drinking like this. After a while, everyone on the boat quickly set up a long table. The sea breeze blew past his ears. Looking at the boundless sea, Cheng Cheng stepped on the moonwalk and stood on the main mast like a wind, looking into the distance. Except for Beckman, who glanced at Cheng Cheng doubtfully, everyone else was busy preparing for the banquet. Congratulations, uncle, your sign-in was successful. Close black lens bracket. The word, brother, sounds particularly loud, but I am certain that this person will reach heights that none of us can imagine in the future. As for Shanks, he was slumped on the chair with a silly smile on his face, his right hand caressing his left hand affectionately, and he was talking to himself so hard that he couldn't hear what he was talking about, as if he was meeting an old friend who had been lost for many years. Advertisement. Then Cheng Cheng's pale golden eyes suddenly turned golden, and his entire pupils turned golden. 2 rays of golden light burst out from his eyes, and he instantly felt an extremely pure power pouring into his entire body, limbs and bones. Uncle red-haired, I'm still young, will this mess up the seniority? Cheng Cheng reminded kindly. Cheng Cheng quickly smiled and added, how about we drink some? Cheng Cheng cursed in his heart, old fox, don't think I don't know why you said the word brother so loudly. Some people went to get wine from below the cabin, while others moved stools. Fatty Lou turned around and walked into the kitchen to start cooking his own special dish. Shanks pulled out the griffin, cut off the table in front of him with a sword, and said sternly, who dares to talk nonsense in front of me, like this table? He walked leisurely on the deck, because the ship was very big, and the feedback from his feet on the deck was very stable, almost as if he were stepping on the ground. But now even if the check-in place is the red-haired man's bed, he probably won't stop him, right? Ahahaha. Reward, Saiyan bloodline. Close black lens bracket. Cheng Cheng frowned slightly. This is the highest position on the ship, but the mission still hasn't been triggered? Everyone is busy. Beckman squinted his eyes, looked at the red-haired man with a cigarette in his mouth, and asked, what did this kid do? A thought occurred to me, that is where the ship's sailing direction is controlled. It should be very possible, right? He jumped up, his whole body like a light swallow, lightly touched the deck, and walked to the rudder of the ship easily. Change, all change now. After arriving near the rudder, Cheng Cheng slowly reached out and touched the wheel-like rudder. While they were busy, Cheng Cheng had nothing to do. There is a mysterious power in him, as if it does not belong to this world. I don't know what it is specifically, Shanks said softly without looking up. Start wandering around the deck to see where you can sign in and clock in. After Cheng Cheng pretended to watch for a while, he was about to get down when he looked ahead at the position of the rudder. Cheng Cheng suddenly put his hands on his hips, looked up to the sky and laughed, mumbling with a smile on his face. Saiyan. I can also transform, ha ha ha. Chapter 102. Shanks wine. Less than 20 minutes. The table was filled with big fish and meat, piled up like a hill. Because there were so many people, mainly the leaders of the red-haired pirate group sat around the long table. Others were sitting in groups of 7 or 8 around small tables, and some people were sitting directly on the deck in groups of 3 or 5, with all kinds of wine and delicacies piled in front of them. No one said hello, they all started to move their mouths very consciously, eating what they should eat and drinking what they should drink. The atmosphere on the boat instantly became lively and lively. I want to have a good drink today, come, yeah, it's been so many years, today is definitely a day that our red-haired pirates need to commemorate, let's do it. At the red-haired group's table, Shanks was sitting at the head seat, next to him were Cheng Cheng and Vice Captain Beckman, and the other officers were sitting casually. Jesus Boo, Dagoo, Bendick Snake, Lime Jones, and Roaring Garb, Bank Punch and his monkeys, pretty much the entire cadre is at this table. Shanks looked at Cheng Cheng with a smile and said, Brother Cheng Cheng, it seems that you have gained something again just now. Cheng Cheng, who was biting the chicken leg, stopped instantly and looked at Shanks in surprise. He thought to himself, my daughter didn't even introduce me to me, but she still wants to trick me, what a wonderful idea. The surprise in his eyes quickly flashed away, nothing, they're just trivial trinkets. No matter what they are, they're garbage in front of your unparalleled domineering uncle red-haired uncle. Ah ha ha. Shanks looked up to the sky and laughed heartily, then he pointed to the brown wine jar in front of him and said, I have been keeping this jar of wine for 10 years and have never been willing to drink it, but today in order to entertain you, I will make an exception. Cheng Cheng pursed his lips helplessly and said, Uncle red-haired, I don't believe there is any wine that can be stored on your ship for 10 years. Jesus B.U. revealed the red hair without mercy. Captain, if I remember correctly, Ace said the same thing last time when he came to see you, right? Don't listen to the captain's nonsense. This wine has only been stored for a year at most, but it is indeed the best wine we have here. Beckman said slowly while holding a cigarette in his mouth. Everyone burst out laughing. Shanks didn't change his expression and said with a playful smile, we are all friends, do you still want to hang out on my ship in the future? Don't you know how to save some face for me? Advertisement. My dad is not an outsider, so he doesn't care about face. At this time, Fatty Lou came over with a large bowl of bones and meat in both hands, sat down on his seat, and said to Cheng Cheng with a smile, you said so. Right, Dad. Cheng Cheng just shook his head and sighed helplessly. The atmosphere on the ship was exactly the same as that of Luffy and the others. I'm afraid only Shanks with such a free and easy temperament can become Luffy's leader. Shanks also put away his cynical smile at this time, sat up a little straighter, and slowly opened the wine jar in front of him. Boom. After opening the lid, Cheng Cheng, who was close, instantly smelled a strong aroma of wine. Shanks skillfully poured wine for Cheng Cheng with one hand, and the crystal clear wine poured out from the mouth of the jar, crashing into the white porcelain bowl like a small waterfall. The red wine was swirling, but miraculously, not a drop of wine was spilled. Good wine. Good technique, Cheng Cheng couldn't help but say in admiration. The red-haired man grinned calmly, nothing but my familiarity. Cheng Cheng was speechless for a moment and could only silently extend a thumb. After Shanks poured Cheng Cheng wine, he quickly poured himself a bowl. He was not in a hurry to drink, and said with a rare serious look, Brother Cheng Cheng, as long as you let me do the things you want me to do with the remaining 2 control rights, I can promise you anything if it doesn't violate my principles as a human being. Even if you ask me to kill 2 Tianlong people, I dare to promise you. As soon as he finished speaking, all the cadres fell silent and looked at Cheng Cheng with slightly nervous expressions. Judging from the fact that the captain's arm had just been restored, Cheng Cheng's 3 absolute control rights should be true. What should we do if Cheng Cheng orders Shanks to attack Marine Headquarters or the Holy Land Mary Joa? Does Shanks have the right to say no? You can even use the red-haired life to threaten everyone. Even more extreme, Cheng Cheng can control everything in the red-haired pirate group without using the control twice. In this case, it would be better for Cheng Cheng to state his request now, so that all of them can feel at ease. Dad, you can just say whatever you want. Money, land, or people, or a pirate ship. You just need to name a number, and we, the red-haired pirates, can do it for you. Advertisement, yes, Brother Cheng Cheng, you can say whatever you want. If our red-haired pirates don't have it, I'll go grab it for you right now. Brother Cheng Cheng, to tell you the truth, in the past few years, I have thought countless times that if one of my arms can be exchanged for the captain's arm, I will definitely agree without hesitation, 2 for 1. It's okay, but I can't do any of these, I can only think about it. But today you really helped the boss recover his arm. I still can't believe it is true. As soon as these words came out, everyone fell silent, obviously they all thought so. For a moment, countless eyes with mixed emotions focused on Cheng Cheng. Cheng Cheng smiled and glanced at these cadres. Any one of these people he picked out was a famous pirate in the New World. However, at this moment, they all looked at him with a hint of nervousness. Cheng Cheng stood up with a calm expression and picked up the bowl of wine on the table. He did not answer everyone's questions, but silently said in his heart, "Follow my orders." Then he looked up at Shanks with a smile and said loudly, "Shanks, let's go one by one. I toast you for being Luffy's leader." Shanks looked at Cheng Cheng, who changed the subject, and knew that he shouldn't force Cheng Cheng at this time. After all, he was his biggest benefactor now, and he never did such things as repaying kindness with enmity. He stood up and laughed heartily. "Come on, let's go." Boom. The wine bowls collide, and the wine in the bowls blends with each other. The two of them raised their hands and drank in one gulp. After finishing the drink, Cheng Cheng continued to fill up the wine for the two of them and said solemnly, "Shanks, this second glass of wine, I salute you who will appear invincible and domineering in the future." Shanks frowned slightly and said seriously, "When did my red hair stop being invincible?" The two drank again. Cheng Cheng chuckled, "Otherwise, would you say this with a white beard? I wasn't afraid of his red beard when I had one hand, let alone 2 hands now." Shanks waved his hand and said with great pride, "After we finish drinking, I will take you to find Whitebeard tomorrow. Ace's matter is not a big deal." Shanks suddenly had a thought in his mind and hurriedly stretched out his right hand to look at it. The 2 remaining pale golden lines on the back of his hand had disappeared without knowing it. He was slightly startled and stared at Cheng Cheng for a while before hesitating and said, "How about I introduce my daughter to you?" Chapter 103 The Second Emperor. After 3 rounds of drinking, everyone on the Dreyfus was having a great time drinking. There was laughter, and smiles were on all faces. While the glasses were clinking, someone took the opportunity to pour some wine into other people's glasses. Some people smiled and pretended not to see it, while raising their glasses and drinking it down in one gulp. Suddenly, there was a violent noise in the distance on the sea. They fired more than a dozen black cannonballs, and in a blink of an eye, those cannonballs carrying huge destructive power rushed over the red-haired pirate ship. Even in the face of such danger, the expressions of everyone on the ship remained unchanged, as if they did not notice these shells that could damage the hull at all. Jesus looked at the cannonballs charging towards him with disdain, and sneered in his heart. With these toys, he wanted to threaten our red-haired pirates. It was simply a fool's errand. He raised his sniper rifle, without aiming at all, and fired instinctively in the air. Those annoying Marines are here again, why don't they have a longer memory? Bang 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 bang. A dozen cannonballs above everyone's heads exploded instantly, and it was like a dozen black fireworks bursting out in the sky at the same time. The people below just felt a slightly stronger wind blowing above their heads, and then continued to laugh and drink. Cheng Cheng was filled with emotion. This was the first time he saw someone using a sniper rifle as a Gatling weapon. Fatty Lou stood up and tore off a piece of meat in his hand, snorting coldly. "You dare to disturb our banquet time, I will deal with them now." Etc. Shanks looked at the marine battleship ahead coldly, with disdain in his heart. In this New World sea, it was not their marine who had the final say. In the New World, you have to abide by his own rules. Especially in this moment worthy of celebration, killing them is just a way of celebrating the recovery of his left arm. Shanks stood up with a swaying body, slowly pulled out the famous sword Griffin from his waist. His cheeks were slightly red, and he muttered, "Leave me alone, I am happy today, so I will reward them with a sword." With Griffin fully unsheathed, black light flashed like lightning instantly on the sword body, like tiny black dragons. Each black lightning seemed to have the power to devour everything. The others were all staring at their old god Tyr with a solemn expression. After how long, they finally saw the boss draw his sword seriously again. The black lightning on the blade became more and more dense. A strong wind instantly spread out with the red hair as the center, and the black cloak behind him billowed. Immediately, the red-haired man rose up from the ground and stayed in the air. His expression was calm, and his arms were gently waving forward diagonally, as if he was using no force. However, the next moment, a black sword light hundreds of meters long roared out. Advertisement 7 marine battleships thousands of meters away were neatly cut in half from the middle in an instant. All the battleships exploded instantly. A sea of fire rose on the sea, and screams could not be heard. Cheng Cheng squinted at the sheer hell on the sea and took a breath of cold air. Holy land, Marie Joya. In the empty and silent hall, a marine suddenly ran in hurriedly, sweating profusely. After seeing the figures of the 5 old men in front of him, he immediately knelt down and said hurriedly, "5 elders, it's not good. All the fleets we sent to the New World a few days ago were sunk, and no one survived. 4 emperors Edward Newgate and red-haired Shanks, for some unknown reason, came into direct contact on the sea of the New World." One of the 5 elders with an angular face stood up suddenly, with cold sweat breaking out on his forehead, and asked in disbelief, "What did you say? What are those 2 guys going to do?" The direct contact between the 2 emperors is a huge event. Another 5 elders touched his bald head and murmured solemnly, "Somewhere in the New World, Above the calm sea, there's blue sky and white clouds, and the sky is clear. The sea breeze gently blew the sea surface, rolling up shallow ripples. There are two huge pirate ships traveling less than 100 meters away from each other, and they will soon come into contact. The two pirate ships are the white-bearded Moby D*K and the red-haired Dreyfus. On the Whitebeard pirate ship, a pirate wearing a white cowboy hat ran up to Whitebeard and said loudly, "Dad, the red hair is here. He said he wants to see you now. Let him come over. That boy must have brought good wine." The white-bearded man raised his glass, raised his head to the sky and took a sip of wine, and said in a deep voice. Without saying a word, the pirate immediately ran out and ordered their ship to adjust its direction and start contact with the red-haired pirate ship. The already huge Dreyfus became a bit smaller after it got close to the white-bearded Moby D*K. In comparison, the Moby D*K was as tall as a small mountain moving on the sea. The helmsman on the Dreyfus shouted loudly, "The direction is normal, reef the sail." Cheng Cheng stood at the deck railing and looked at the oppressive Moby D*K, feeling even more excited. Finally, I can meet the strongest man in the world. He has always wanted to see how domineering and unparalleled the person with the power to destroy the world is. The red-haired man straightened his clothes, walked over and said to Cheng Cheng with a smile, "Shall we go?" Advertisement. Cheng Cheng nodded slightly and walked side by side with the red hair, heading to the hill like Moby D*K. The moment the two of them boarded the ship, someone on the Moby D*K shouted loudly, "Get ready to meet the red-haired captain." Phoenix Marco, who had yellow hair and looked like a bad boy, immediately said in a deep voice, "Young people, please step back and stay away. Your bodies can't bear it." These words immediately caused a commotion, and everyone around asked questions. What does it mean that the body can't bear it? It's impossible for the red-haired captain to take action against us, right? Marco stood up and said impatiently, "Stop guessing, there is no time now, you have to go to the cabin quickly, there is still time." But he just finished speaking. Boom! There was a muffled sound next to him, and a sturdy pirate fell to the ground without any warning. "Hey, brother, what's wrong with you? What happened?" Next, some of the pirates on the ship fell down one after another, and suddenly fainted, not knowing whether they were alive or dead. Marco sighed, "Forget it, it seems it's too late, don't worry, I just fainted, just think of it as a nap." It's impossible to stay awake in front of that man with half-hearted mental capacity. The tall Diamond Josie stood up and said calmly. On the deck, everyone who could still stand looked towards the stairs and saw two men boarding the spacecraft side by side. The red-haired man was carrying a huge wine jar in his right hand. The wine jar made a harsh sound when it was placed on the deck. Every time he took a step forward, there would be more tiny cracks on the nearby wooden railing. The other person is a young man with white hair, dressed in black, carrying a broad sword on his back, and looking calm. When Marco saw this man, his expression became condensed. Who is this young man? He can actually walk side by side with the red-haired man? He and Chowzi looked at each other, and they both saw shock in each other's eyes. Even Marco, who possesses the phantom beast Phoenix, considers himself unqualified to walk side by side with Shanks. Who is this white-haired young man? Does he have the qualifications? Marco shook his head. He didn't think anyone of the younger generation had such qualifications and confidence. "Shanks, you are still so domineering." The white-bearded man who was drinking while injecting the infusion laughed heartily. Then he looked at Cheng Cheng and exclaimed, "Isn't this young man simple?" "Boy, who are you? Tell me your name." Chapter 104 Whitebeard. Cheng Cheng raised his head and looked up at the burly old man sitting in front of him. He didn't want to look up, but this old man with a white beard like a crescent moon was too tall. Even if he was sitting now, he was almost as tall as a basketball basket. Just looking at this old man, he was so tall. I can feel the pressure like a mountain. Before seeing Whitebeard, Cheng Cheng had already tried to increase the pressure brought by this man as much as possible, but when he really faced this man who was recognized as the strongest man in the world, his heart still beat involuntarily. The domineering nature of Whitebeard and red hair gave Cheng Cheng two completely different feelings. Shanks walks the royal road. He usually has the gentle aura of a humble gentleman, but only shows off his domineering attitude at critical moments. Whitebeard, on the other hand, is completely overbearing. Even if he sits quietly, his overbearing aura can put tremendous pressure on people. It's just that the man who is now known as a living legend now has a tired look on his face, and he has intravenous drips and oxygen tubes inserted all over his body. Cheng Cheng couldn't help but sigh. Time is not forgiving, and heroes will inevitably grow old. Cheng Cheng took a deep breath and silently circulated the water breath. This calmed his chaotic heart a little. He smiled calmly. "I am Ace's eldest brother Cheng Cheng. I wrote you a letter some time ago. I don't know. Have you received it?" Whitebeard suddenly realized and said cheerfully, "It turns out to be you. Since you are Ace's eldest brother, you can call me Daddy. You and Ace are both outstanding young people. Otherwise, most people will simply not be able to bear this red-haired kid." The domineering attitude. Cheng Cheng immediately rolled his eyes. "I don't have the habit of calling people Daddy casually. You'd better leave your precious son's place to others." When Whitebeard saw his refusal, he wasn't angry at all and started laughing. Marco on the side said to the red-haired man, "Shanks, look at what you did. Our brothers all fainted. I'm sorry, I gave you a slap in the face the first time I came to your ship." The redhead smiled all over his face and said he was sorry, but there was no hint of apology at all. "Marco, do you want to come with me? It's boring to stay with the old man." Marco snorted coldly and stopped looking at the redhead. You all should stand down, Shanks doesn't seem to be looking for a fight with me today, Whitebeard said in a deep voice. The others all receded like the tide, and soon only Whitebeard, Hongfa and Cheng Cheng were left on the deck. Advertisement. Shanks opened the large jar of wine, and the rich aroma of wine filled the air. Immediately with a flick of his wrist, the jar of wine flew lightly towards Whitebeard. Ahahaha. Shanks said it was a request, not a request. Shanks also fell into memories. Thinking of that guy, he couldn't help but smile. Buggy, he's not dead. I heard he also became a pirate. But after we were separated in Rogue Town, I never saw him again. Guy. Cheng Cheng said expressionlessly. If it wasn't for Ace, why would I write you that letter? Although I know you don't believe what I said, but as Ace's eldest brother, I have to do some things. One word difference makes a world of difference, Shanks said in a deep voice. I came to you today partly because of the request of my brother Cheng Cheng, and partly because of my own wishes. Whitebeard laughed loudly, raised his head and took another sip, and said with emotion. This man, as he gets older, it is easy to recall the past. Among the old people, Roger, Garp, and Warring States are also old and familiar with the sea. There are fewer and fewer people. He raised his head and took a big sip. Because he drank so hard, the wine flowed down his chin and onto his clothes. He said smoothly, good wine. Oh. Whitebeard took a deep look at the red hair and said solemnly, as long as you don't regret it. In an instant, Cheng Cheng felt tremendous pressure. The air around him seemed to be compressed. His water breathing was forcibly interrupted, making it difficult to breathe. Whitebeard snorted coldly. What qualifications do you have to ask for red hair? Cheng Cheng's narrow eyes flashed with golden light. He took a deep breath and looked directly at Whitebeard. What qualifications do I have? Of course it depends on my strength. Cheng Cheng on the side couldn't help rolling his eyes. Why did these words sound so familiar? At present, it seems that I have signs of winning the bet. Shanks turned to look at Cheng Cheng and continued to add. None other than Blackbeard, teach, advertisement. Cheng Cheng thought about it and knew that the topic was coming soon. As soon as he finished speaking, Cheng Cheng felt a sudden increase in pressure. The invisible strong wind blew his black clothes loudly, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He snorted coldly, stamped his feet suddenly, the deck shattered, and an invisible strong wind spread out from his body, colliding with Whitebeard's pressure. Whitebeard gave a heavy hum, and then said in a deep voice, You bring this little guy to me today, and if you have anything to do, just tell me directly. Whitebeard turned his head to look at Cheng Cheng in confusion. His eyes narrowed and he looked at him curiously, while chewing Shanks' words in his heart. Lousy respects you because you are Captain Ace. Do you really think I am afraid of you? Whitebeard stretched out his hand casually, and he caught the wine jar firmly. The huge wine jar in Whitebeard's hand looked like an ordinary-sized wine glass. Whitebeard, do you know who caused these 3 scars on me? If it weren't for the sake of you being Ace's eldest brother, how would you be able to speak here? Shanks looked at the arm hidden under the black cloak and said with a smile, I bet it on the new era. This is the wine that I have treasured for 20 years. No one shares it with me on weekdays, so I only take it out when I see you. The red-haired man smiled. I didn't expect that the kid on the boat turned into a sea emperor in the blink of an eye. But I am very curious that a strong man like you lost an arm in the small East China Sea. Tell me, who was it? Injured? The red-haired man bent over and sat cross-legged on the deck. Because his black cloak just covered his left arm, even Whitebeard didn't see anything strange about the red-haired left arm, but subconsciously thought it was an empty strip. Arms. By the way, I remember that there was a guy with a red nose who was with you at that time. Is he dead? Whitebeard suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed, as if he had heard some funny joke. How many years have passed, and there are still people talking about strength in front of me. Cheng Cheng cursed secretly, old guy. Huh? Whitebeard leaned forward, and his eyes towards Cheng Cheng changed a little. Shanks looked at the smell of gunpowder between the two and secretly thought he didn't want the two to fight. He quickly took over the topic, pointed to the scar on his left eye and said, Whitebeard, do you know who caused these 3 scars on me? Chapter 105. Shopping. Seeing that Whitebeard had no reaction, the red-haired man said solemnly and seriously, I have experienced countless large and small battles in my life. Up to now, my body still hurts. Only Blackbeard gave me these 3 scars. I wasn't careless when I was fighting Blackbeard, so even if Cheng Cheng doesn't come to find me, I will come to you myself. Shanks raised his head and stared into Whitebeard's eyes. I think you should know what I'm talking about. The Whitebeard slowly sat up straight, looking at the red hair with a cold expression, saying nothing. But in Cheng Cheng's eyes, Whitebeard's entire body was filled with such strong murderous intent that the temperature of the surrounding air dropped a few points. Cheng Cheng took a step forward despite the huge pressure, and said in a deep voice, Blackbeard teach, he has been secretly holding back all these years, just to wait for the most suitable time on your ship. Obviously he has the strength to be a captain, but he is willing to choose mediocrity and hide under your famous name of Whitebeard. However, now Blackbeard has got what he wants, so he started to act according to his own will, and finally snatched your position. No one can stop him now, not even Ace, even you, even Whitebeard can't do it. Whitebeard slowly turned his head and stared at Cheng Cheng. So, what do you want me to do? Stop Ace. Although Ace is very strong, Ace's potential is endless. Believe me, as Ace's eldest brother, I know this better than you. Cheng Cheng's eyes flashed with golden light, and he said without giving in, but Ace, who became famous at a young age, is too confident. You haven't realized how powerful Blackbeard is. It's not the time for the two of them to fight decisively. Just wait. In 2 years, Ace will win. Whitebeard, just think I'm begging you, stop Ace. Suddenly, Whitebeard suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed, ah ha 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 ha. For the sake of you being Ace, I will tell you a few more words. That Blackbeard guy committed an absolutely unforgivable crime on my ship. He broke my Whitebeard rules. If I don't chase him, if I kill Teach, how will my dead child rest in peace? Blackbeard, he has crossed the threshold of death and must die. Do you understand, white-haired boy, if you want to teach me how to do things, just wait another 100 years. Boom. Whitebeard slammed the wine jar in his hand towards Cheng Cheng. Cheng Cheng, who was already in full swing, dodged sideways in advance and avoided the attack from the wine jar. He slowly held the Zhenhai sword, the golden light in his eyes slowly expanded, and the muscles all over his body swelled instantly. Waves of hurricanes spread outward with him as the center, blowing Shank's black cloak with a hunting sound. It seems that this era of violence is finally about to begin. Advertisement Cheng Cheng's sleeves were billowing, and his black robe was flying in the wind. He said coldly, Whitebeard, your arrogance will eventually kill you. Shanks stared at Cheng Cheng with his eyes narrowed. Is this guy drawing a sword against Whitebeard? Are you crazy? This kid? Whitebeard suddenly stood up, and all the oxygen tubes and intravenous drips inserted in his body fell off. He looked up to the sky and roared, stretched out his hand to hold Kong Yunki, one of the 12 skills of the supreme sharp sword, with one hand, and pointed the tip of the knife directly at Cheng Cheng's head. So what, I'm Whitebeard. At this moment, Cheng Cheng's whole body was filled with golden light. Facing Whitebeard's angry blow, Cheng Cheng's eyes were calm and there was no trace of panic. He held the Zhenhai sword tightly with his 5 fingers. In an instant, the originally clear sky dimmed, and there was a haze that only appeared on the eve of a storm. Above the sea, there are countless tiny thunderbolts, falling from the sky and hitting the sea. Marco, Diamond Josie and others looked at the strange scenery around them at the stern of the boat, all looking shocked. What's going on? What did Ace's eldest brother do? Shanks silently felt Cheng Cheng's rising aura, opened his mouth slightly, stood up and took a few steps back. At this moment, he let go of Griffin in his hand. Suddenly, a bright golden light appeared on Cheng Cheng's body, and his silver hair seemed to stand upside down and turned into blonde hair. The wood chips on the ground on the deck beneath my feet began to rise slowly, as if gravity disappeared at this moment. Whitebeard's expression gradually became serious. He looked at Cheng Cheng and said, You young man, you have something. The corners of Cheng Cheng's mouth raised slightly, feeling the surging power in his body after transforming into a Super Saiyan. He extended his index finger to Whitebeard and hooked his hand. You'll know if you try it. Whitebeard shouted loudly, and cracks appeared in the air instantly. The Kongyunch in his hand, packed with unparalleled brute force, drew a white sword light in the air, and slashed towards Cheng Cheng in front of him. The huge clouds cut across, and purple light bloomed, as if this sword was going to split the heaven and the earth. Well done. Advertisement Cheng Cheng laughed and stepped forward. The deck instantly cracked and sawdust shot out. He raised the Zhenhai sword and went towards it. Boom. The next moment, the swords collided together. There was a sound that resounded throughout the world, but both of them remained motionless, and neither of them took a step back. The shock wave from the collision of the swords violently hit Marco, Diamond Josie and others at the stern of the ship. Marco was shocked when he saw that this young man, who was much younger than himself, could bear a knife from his father head on. Even he, under his father's knife, would be seriously injured even if he did not die. However, the young man in front of him was as good as his father. He couldn't help but murmured, the new emperor will be born soon. Diamond Josie frowned and said, that F**********, do you want to die? It's okay, we can't start a fight, it's probably just that a certain negotiation has broken down. Marco said in a deep voice, holding out his hand to stop Josie who wanted to step forward to check. Look at the sky, someone from behind suddenly exclaimed. For a moment, both the red-haired pirates and the white-bearded pirates subconsciously looked up at the sky. Everyone saw only a sea of clouds rolling in the dark cloudy and misty sky, and a black crack that was 1,000 meters long appeared. The sky is cracked. The red-haired man standing next to the railing took a deep breath, looked at Cheng Cheng, who had blonde hair, and sighed. It seems that the gears of destiny in the new era will be turned by you. After Whitebeard put away Kong Yunki, he sat back on the chair, took a deep look at Cheng Cheng, and sighed. Even when Roger was young, he couldn't reach your level, young man. You have the right to speak to me as an equal. In that case, do you believe what I said? Cheng Cheng looked directly at Whitebeard and asked. Whitebeard said slowly, if it's like you said, Ace will be caught and executed by Marine, then the worst I can do is demolish the Marine headquarters. Garp and Sengoku, they know my strength. Cheng Cheng sighed, knowing that the old man couldn't be persuaded no matter what, so he said to Shanks. Let's go. In that case, let's have a good fight. Chapter 106 Kizaru aboard Moby D*K. After Whitebeard and Cheng Cheng exchanged sword blows, the deck was in a mess, and there were many cracks on the railings of the bow. After Cheng Cheng and Shanks left, 3 petite female nurses immediately ran to Whitebeard's side. The female nurses held various medical instruments in their hands, climbed onto Whitebeard's body skillfully, and reinserted the intravenous drip and oxygen tubes into Whitebeard's body. Whitebeard looked tired and sat slumped on the chair. He had long been accustomed to the behavior of the female nurses. Marco, Diamond Josie, and Beasta also stepped forward at this time. Dad, your body? Marco asked hesitantly. In front of his sons, Whitebeard lost a lot of his scornful aura. His back was pressed against the chair, his hands casually dropped on his thighs, and he sighed and said, I can't accept the old age. After all, I am getting old, it's me. When I was young, I had to fight with that kid for at least 3 days and 3 nights. Dad, you can't be so impulsive in the future. You know better than us what your physical condition is, Beasta said helplessly. Seeing the concern of these children for him, Whitebeard laughed heartily and said loudly, Don't worry, no matter how bad my health is, I will still have no problem if I live for 10 to 8 years. But what that white-haired boy said seems to make some sense. Whitebeard said in a deep voice, then closed his eyes and thought for a while, then said in a deep voice, Marco, go and help Ace. If he is really injured, bring him back. Yes, Dad, I'm going to find Ace now, Marco said with joy on his face and quickly agreed. On the sea far away from here, the Dreyfus is chopping through the wind and waves, gradually getting farther and farther away from the Moby D*K. Shanks and other cadres were standing on the deck, preparing to see Cheng Cheng off. Brother Cheng Cheng, why don't you leave and stay on my ship? How about I give you the position of deputy captain? Shanks raised his head and took a sip of wine, looked at Cheng Cheng with a smile and said. Cheng Cheng also picked up the wineglass and took a sip. He didn't speak immediately and looked at Beckman. Beckman immediately stood up straight and said seriously, I will abdicate immediately. I have been feeling a little sick in my stomach recently, and the first officer has long since stopped wanting to do this. Dad, if you stay with our red-haired thieves, I guarantee that you will eat and drink every day, and cook something different every day for 360 days a year. Fatty Lou said as he bit the bone and meat. Cheng Cheng shook his head helplessly and said, Forget it, instead of joining your red-haired pirate group, it would be more interesting for me to build a force that is more powerful than you. Advertisement Shanks, who was just asking casually, didn't really think that Cheng Cheng would agree. After all, a person like Cheng Cheng would definitely become a king in the future. How could he stay on his ship willingly? If that's the case, then I won't keep you. The red-haired man calmly said to the people around him, Prepare a small boat for my brother, put all the good wine and meat in the warehouse on it, and let my brother eat on the way back. Cheng Cheng said quickly, Thank you Shanks, the boat is no longer needed, but you can get me a jar of wine. You don't want a boat. Are you going to cross the sea on the moonwalk? The red-haired man asked doubtfully. The big black fish was tossing vigorously in his arms, swishing its tail and splashing water. Among them were notorious pirates who were carrying supplies to their ships, poor local people who made a living by fishing, and wealthy businessmen who were inspecting the dock surrounded by plump beauties. Dad, look, there's a marine battleship coming. This is so cool, Tony said excitedly, and by accident, the big black fish in his arms broke free from his hands and jumped into the sea. It was noon at this moment, the sun was shining on the sea, the waves were sparkling, and there was a lot of people in excitement. There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his tone. That old guy from the Warring States period came to me whenever he wanted to help. What's even more disgusting is that he actually threatened me with deducting his year-end bonus. But little Tony still pouted with a look of reluctance. The next moment, Tony put away his smile and leaned forward to dive into the seawater, hoping to catch his big black fish again. Cheng Cheng smiled mysteriously, took a sip of wine, looked up to the sky and shouted, Somersault Cloud. Kizaru, one of the 3 generals of the Marine headquarters, stood proudly on the bow of the battleship, overlooking the entire Alabasta. There is a small fishing boat on the edge of the messy boat pile. The most disgusting thing is that Garp, a Marine lieutenant general, threatened me, a general, with his fists. Your grandson, right? Let's see if I don't take him back and interrogate him properly. After a while, the huge Marine warship gradually surpassed the small wooden boat in front. Advertisement Shanks looked at the golden cloud flying over with confusion and asked, A conscious cloud? Is it Charlotte Linland's Zeus? Cheng Cheng smiled and explained, She is the boss of Zeus, much more powerful than Zeus. Alabasta, the port city of Narahara. Near the pier, there were many ships docked in a disorderly manner, large and small, mixed together in a chaotic manner. Shanks looked carefully at this young man who kept surprising him, his mouth wide open in surprise. Suddenly, Tony stood on tiptoes and looked excitedly into the distance. Just like people coming and going on the edge of the pier, there is a mixture of fish and dragons, and all kinds of people are present, but in most cases everything is peaceful. On the sea in the distance, a huge marine warship was slowly sailing over. In front of the warship, there was a small wooden boat that was so small that it could almost be ignored. Everyone in the red-haired pirate group, including Shanks, clasped their hands and returned the greeting to Cheng Cheng, who was walking away. After saying that, Cheng Cheng tapped his toes, stood up from the ground, jumped into the somersault cloud, and left in the wind. Shanks, if Ace is really caught and executed by Marine one day in the future, I'll be begging you then. Then everyone in the red-haired pirate group saw a golden line drawing across the horizon in the distance. Seeing this, Kit, the middle-aged man on the boat, immediately grabbed Tony's belt and pulled him back to the middle of the boat. He smiled and comforted. We have gained a lot today, it doesn't matter if we lose one. Tony, a little boy of 7 or 8 years old, held the big black fish that his father had just caught in his hands. Then Cheng Cheng said nothing more, raised his hands and clasped his fists to everyone on the deck, and said loudly, I am extremely lucky to be able to meet you all. The Green Mountains will not change, and the Blue Sea will always flow. We will see you someday. However, this seemingly chaotic stop can operate surprisingly well and maintain a wonderful balance. Suddenly, Cheng Cheng gave the red-haired man a heavy fist and saluted, and said sternly, No, I remember Zeus seems to be a white cloud, right? It wasn't until the golden thread disappeared from everyone's sight that they slowly lowered their arms. Shanks patted Cheng Cheng on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Even if you don't say it, just because of Luffy's relationship, I will definitely go. And I have a hunch that this will definitely happen." Chapter 107 The Boy and the Fish. The huge marine battleship, even when it arrived near the dock, its sailing speed still did not slow down too much. Breaking through the sea surface, he rushed towards the dock. Kit has been fishing here for decades and is an experienced fisherman. He has long developed the ability to accurately judge the speed of passing ships. He looked at the huge battleship in front of him, his heart sank. He immediately put away the fishing net and rode the oar with both hands. "Tony, hurry up and hold on to the edge of the boat, let's get out of here quickly." Tony didn't know why his father had to leave suddenly, but he still held on to the wooden handle on the edge of the ship with both hands, and his eyes kept looking curiously at the battleship ahead. The small fishing boat quickly moved under Kit's control. Just more than 10 meters away from the original spot, the huge marine warship did not slow down and crashed into it. The huge mountain-like warship was like a wolf among sheep. The hull of the ship, which was originally docked quietly at the dock, was instantly knocked to pieces. First, 3 merchant ships and a pirate ship were directly knocked over, and the entire hull was directly smashed from the middle. Waves of waves several meters high were set off, causing the boat next to it to shake violently. Although Kit's small fishing boat had moved away from there in advance, it was still too close after all. A huge wave hit and overturned the small fishing boat. The fishing nets and fishing rods on the fishing boat, the bamboo lunchbox that Tony had just brought from home, and the 2 large bamboo baskets of fish that had been harvested after a whole day of fishing also fell into the sea. Kit quickly and deftly turned the small fishing boat over and put Tony on the boat. He looked up and saw that the dock in the distance was now a mess. There are boxes and boxes of supplies floating everywhere on the sea. Some broken wooden boxes have apples and vegetables leaking out and floating on the sea. Broken wooden boards floated, and the water turned faintly red in some places. There was a lot of noise and people were rushing to pack things and save supplies. Despite this, Kit didn't hear a single curse on Marine. He sighed, stopped looking over there, and picked up the fishing nets and lunchboxes floating on the sea again. When he opened the lunchbox, he saw that the rice and hot dishes inside had already been soaked by the seawater. With a wry smile, he closed the bamboo lunchbox again. "Bad people, Dad, Marine is all bad people, our big black fish is gone, woo woo woo." Advertisement. Tony cried and said, "Let them pay for our fish, let them pay for it, how could they do this, woo woo woo." Kit rubbed Tony's little head and comforted him. "They may have been careless. We'd better go back quickly, otherwise your mother will have to worry about us at home." Tony pursed his lips tightly. Now he didn't think this big ship was cool at all. He clenched his fists, looked at the huge marine battleship angrily, and said angrily, "They did it on purpose." Kit was stunned for a moment, not knowing how to persuade his child. At this time, a small raft passed them in the distance, with a tall middle-aged man wearing a purple kimono standing on it. The middle-aged man had a staggered scar on his forehead, his eyes were closed tightly, and he said softly, "Kid, you were right. If I hadn't slowed down the battleship a little, I'm afraid the entire dock would have been destroyed by now. It's gone." "Look, Dad, this uncle also said that they did it on purpose." Tony felt more and more aggrieved and stared at the marine battleship. But the child is just a child after all, how can he understand the key points of the blind elderly man's words? Kit smiled innocently at the middle-aged blind man on the small raft and said nothing more. This blind middle-aged man who stood on a small raft, traveled across the ocean, traveled thousands of miles for 7 days and nights, and finally arrived at Alabasta. His name was Yisheng. He faced Kit with an honest smile and nodded kindly. The small raft did not stop, past Tony and his son, and slid to the dock shore. Ever since he felt the sacred and powerful power 7 days ago, he decided to look for this power. If this power fell into the hands of someone with evil intentions, a terrifying and peerless demon king would undoubtedly be born. So he decided to take that sacred power into his own hands or destroy it. Only in this way can he feel relieved. Only in this way is it the safest for the entire world. The small raft quickly reached the shore. After the doctor fixed the raft, he slowly went ashore. Although he is blind, he can face the complex terrain with ease without any obstacles. At the same time, many Marines headed by General Kizaru also walked down the stairs from the battleship. All the people around were watching in silence, and no one said a word. The owners of the damaged merchant ships looked calm and had no intention of asking for an explanation. Years of doing business made them clearly understand that the identity of the people who stepped off such a huge marine warship was one they could never mess with. Existence. Advertisement. As for the pirates who had been affected by the disaster, they were mixed in the crowd at the moment, and they didn't dare to breathe. They were all too familiar with the cloak that symbolized the marine general. Da da da. A burst of neat footsteps came to everyone's ears. Kizaru, who was walking in front, stopped and looked at everyone and said slowly, "Where's your national master of Alabasta now?" A fat middle-aged man wearing brocade next to him smiled attentively and said, "I wonder what this lord has to do with our imperial master." Kizaru, who was wearing sunglasses, focused his eyes, slowly raised his hand and stretched out his index finger. A yellow energy ray instantly shot out from the fingertip and shot towards the fat man quickly. Ah! A blood hole was instantly pierced by the yellow light on his shoulder, and blood spattered. The middle-aged fat man screamed and fell to the ground in pain. The crowd behind him instantly spread out like a tide, hurriedly moving away from the middle-aged fat man. "I'm not in a very good mood right now. You'd better answer my question directly." Kizaru looked at him condescendingly and said in a slow voice. In Udi. The territory of the Imperial Master is Udi. The middle-aged fat man looked pained and did not dare to complain. Kizaru didn't respond. After opening the map and taking a look, he continued walking forward. The many Marines behind him also followed without saying a word. Master Imperial Master is a good man, Master Marine, you can't take him away, someone in the crowd shouted. Then there was an overwhelming echo. Yes, the Imperial Master is a great and good man. The Imperial Master is the savior of our poor people. If it weren't for him, our family of 3 would have starved to death long ago. Kizaru sneered, looked disdainfully, and walked forward. Suddenly, the little boy Tony rushed out from the crowd regardless, stood in front of Kizaru, clenched his fists and shouted angrily. Don't leave, you'll pay for my fish, chapter 108 people are here and trees are here. Tony suddenly appeared in front of Kizaru, and Kizaru looked down at him contemptuously, silently stretching out a finger, and a little yellow light gathered on the fingertip. He looked pitiful, as if he hadn't seen the little boy, and continued to walk forward. But everyone else around him looked at Tony nervously and took a step back silently, for fear of hurting Caillou. Tony was about to speak when he saw the Marine ignoring him. The next moment, he felt tremendous pressure, his face turned pale, there was sweat on his forehead, and he couldn't say a word. As he saw only a flash of yellow light in front of him, it grew bigger and bigger in his pupils. Every hair on the skin stood on end. Tony, run! Kit found out that his son was lost in the crowd, so he rushed into the crowd and shouted loudly. But Tony's legs are stiff now. He also wants to walk, but his legs can no longer obey his command. Some women around had closed their eyes, unable to bear to see this cruel scene. Such a young child will die soon. The yellow beam was about to touch Tony's forehead. At the critical moment, everyone saw the little boy flying up out of thin air, and instantly flew into the sky, just in time to avoid the fatal yellow beam. The yellow beam lost its target of the little boy and shot straight to the ground ahead. Boom! On the ground paved with stone slabs, a hole as thick as a wrist was punched out in an instant. The stone at the entrance of the hole seemed to be burned, emitting red dots of fire. A wisp of green smoke floated slowly from the entrance of the cave. Everyone looked up to see Tony flying high into the sky. At this time, the little boy could no longer be seen. Just when Kid was about to rush up and ask Kizaru for an explanation, he was startled. He looked at the blind man in purple kimono behind him and pulled him, then walked out of the crowd silently. Kizaru squinted his eyes and took a deep look at the middle-aged blind man who made trouble. Without saying anything, he left with many Marines. On the other side, after listening to the middle-aged blind man's words, Kid quickly left the crowd and ran to his small fishing boat at the dock. Seeing that Tony was less than 10 meters above the small fishing boat and slowly falling down, Kid couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief and relaxed his frown. Advertisement. After a while, Tony, who looked dull, fell down and was hugged by Kid and pinned to the ground. Without saying a word, Kid took off his shoes and hit Tony hard on the butt. Bang bang bang. Tony, who had never been beaten by his father since he was a child, burst into tears. Dad, stop beating me, it hurts, it hurts. The strength in Kid's hands did not diminish, and he scolded. I let you run around. I let you run around. Suddenly Kid remembered something, stopped what he was doing, and took Tony with him to find the middle-aged blind man. But now the crowd has dispersed, and the middle-aged blind man has long disappeared. At this moment, my life is walking slowly on the street. Feeling the direction of the mysterious energy, he politely stopped a passerby, pointed in that direction, and asked, Excuse me, which city is in that direction? The passerby thought for a moment and then said, The direction you mentioned should be to Udi, which is now the fiefdom of the Imperial Master, and many people want to move there. I tell you, if you want to go there, you'd better hurry up and go there. I heard that there have been restrictions on relocation recently, but for a disabled person like you, there should be no problem. Our Imperial Master is the kindest and a great good man. He will definitely not reject a disabled person like you. At the front of the team, a serious-looking Shuya was patiently registering forms, while the burly Kabasi was handing out saplings. Purple light shone on his skin, and he felt unprecedented power in his body. He also knew how important the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree in front of him was to the National Master. They firmly believe that in this way, they can get the protection of the National Master and realize their wishes. Master National Preceptor. Who is this person? As for Kosha, he has been silently practicing water breathing at the edge of the rooftop. Now this job is already familiar to both of them, and there is no pressure at all. The figure of a lifetime gradually faded away, leaving a shallow footprint on the soft desert. After one day. Therefore, in the past few days, Kosha never let the Fantasy Beast Spirit Tree leave his sight, whether he was eating, sleeping, practicing or drinking water. He thought to himself throughout his life that this was the second time he heard other people talk about this person, and without exception, they all spoke highly of him. Advertisement. The Phantom Beast Spirit Tree in front of him is more important than his own life. As for the National Master, he should be a good person. The people below the ground, after seeing this golden light rising into the sky, silently clasped their hands together and began to make wishes in their hearts. After that, Yi Shang shook his head and said, Forget it, let's not worry about the National Master for now. The purpose of this trip is just to take away the sacred power. Yi Shang nodded, thanked the man again, and left slowly towards the front. Kosha's eyes were fixed on the Fantasy Beast Spirit Tree. He had only one idea now. Tuanzi carefully held the large holy grail with both hands. It was full of water of life and shone with little golden light under the sunlight. The people lining up to receive the saplings were still in a long queue, and everyone was talking and laughing about how many trees they had planted, how much bonus they had received, how to spend the money they received, and other issues. On the other side of the branch, there is a small flower bud, waiting to bloom. But since he is a good person, why did he alert Kizaru, one of the 3 generals of the Marine headquarters? Before leaving, the Imperial Master once told him to look at the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree without leaving his side. The Phantom Beast Spirit Tree suspended in the air is obviously much thicker, with denser golden branches and leaves. There is also a golden devil fruit on the crown of the tree. People are here, trees are here, even if the people are gone, the trees will be there too. Then he thought of the scene at the dock just now, and laughed to himself, the 3 generals are not good people either. After the golden petals withered, a phantom beast devil fruit with black and white stripes slowly grew. Above the rooftop, in the rainy place, in front of Cayenne. In an instant, the golden light flourished, alone, walking towards the rainy place. The little flower bud on the fantasy beast spirit tree bloomed instantly, and the flowers bloomed and fell. As the great holy grail tilted, the water of life slowly flowed from top to bottom to the phantom beast spirit tree. Chapter 109 I hack him to death. After Tuanzi watered the phantom beast spirit tree, he carefully placed the great holy grail on the table. Looking at Kusha, who was now able to transform, Tuanzi's eyes were full of envy. She thought to herself, "It shouldn't be. Kosa is such a stupid person. He was able to transform the first day he ate the devil fruit. After so many days, he still can't transform into a phoenix. Why?" And after Kosha transformed, his strength has indeed increased significantly. In the past, I was still sure of defeating Kusha, but now it seems that the chance is slim. Tuanzi slowly walked up to Kusha with an indifferent expression and coughed. "Kusha, how did you transform? Can you tell me in detail?" "It's very simple. You should also be able to feel the power of the devil fruit. All you need to do is release that power." Kosha smiled slightly and patiently explained to Tuanzi. "Is it really that simple?" Tuanzi looked at Kosha suspiciously and continued. "But even if I release that power, it will still come out with flames and show signs of transformation. Is there any trick you haven't told me?" "How is it possible, my eldest lady? Your master has been kind to me. How could I hide it from you? Besides, it's not like you don't know the contract I signed with your master. Now we are both in the same camp. It's only good for me that you become stronger," Kosha explained with a smile. Tuanzi thought for a moment, then pouted and said, "That's true. I can barely believe you. But if you have any new insights, you must tell me in time. Otherwise, when master comes back, he will find that I haven't learned how to change. You must think I'm stupid." "Don't worry, Tuanzi. Once I have any insights, I will tell you as soon as possible," Kosha said firmly. After hearing Kosha's assurance, Tuanzi quickly walked to the phantom beast spirit tree and sat cross-legged. From time to time, a little bit of golden light falls from the branches and leaves of the tree. Whenever this golden light falls on her body, Tuanzi will feel extra warm and comfortable. In front of Cayenne, the crowd that had been queuing quietly was suddenly dispersed. Kizaru lazily walked ahead with his hands in his pockets, followed by more than 200 Marines armed with rifles. "Make way! Give way, everyone, give way to me!" 3 Marines pushed the crowd away from the front, clearing the way for Kizaru. Those people who originally wanted to turn around and curse others immediately swallowed the words on their lips when they saw such a group of people. After discovering such a group of people, the people who were queuing up retreated like a tide. Advertisement. Soon Kizaru came to the front of the team. He asked casually, "Who is the national preceptor Cheng Cheng?" "The national preceptor is not here. Do you have anything to do with the national preceptor?" Kabasi looked at Kizaru and said honestly. Not wanting to talk nonsense, Kizaru stopped at the door of Cayenne, scratched his head, and lazily ordered the people behind him, "Search for me. He is here anyway." "Kosa!" Shuya suddenly shouted without warning, then stood up, looked at Kizaru without fear, and said sternly, "Even if you're a Marine, you can't search at will. At least give us a reason." Kizaru sneered, "Who do you think you are?" Then he raised his finger, and a yellow beam of light instantly shot towards Shuya. At the critical moment, a phantom-like purple figure fell from the sky, appeared in front of Shuya very quickly, and stretched out his palm with a stern face. Involuntarily, Kizaru took another look at the little girl and found that she still had 3 knives hanging on her waist. He immediately said sharply to Marine behind him, "Why are you standing there? Go and search her." Suddenly, a voice came from the rooftop, "Kosa, come back." Kusha's heart suddenly sank. Could it be that the death of Lieutenant General Ghost Spider was discovered by Marine? His fists clenched involuntarily, but he soon regained his composure. But the most important thing is that what this little girl said turned out to be so useful. He gently raised his right foot, and the moment he stood on tiptoe, his entire foot emitted a dazzling yellow light. "Unless you kill me first," Kosha said coldly, clenching his fists tightly, his muscles suddenly swelled, and invisible momentum spread out from his body instantly. Kosha bent his legs and held his hands firmly in place. Although the yellow beam did not threaten his life, he could still feel a stinging pain in his palms. After hearing this, Kosha suddenly realized that his only task was to guard the phantom beast spirit tree. As for the other things, they were all extraneous things to the master. Kosha jumped up, stood up from the ground, and rushed to the rooftop, no longer paying attention to Kizaru. Such a hard skin. The aura and coercion brought by the person in front of him was not at the same level as the Ghost Spider Lieutenant General he met last time. Kizaru examined the purple man in front of him for a while, with the same surprised expression. He looked up at Kusha and continued. As long as the National Master Cheng Cheng is willing to come out, you will not have to die. Shuya and Kabasi both looked at Kosha worriedly and silently gave them a reassuring look. Advertisement. Kosa looked at Kizaru, the Marine General, without fear, shouted loudly, and suddenly stepped on the ground, his feet deeply inserted into the ground. Neither of them spoke anymore. Boom! Kosha was slightly startled. What about you? The yellow beam collided with Kosa's palm, emitting a burning yellow light. I'm going to chop him to death. Tuanzi saw Kusha, who had returned to the balcony, and grinned at Kusha. Protect the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree. Kizaru raised his eyebrows and sneered. What if I don't want to wait, so I have to go in and search now? Kizaru smiled and said, it turns out that you were a Phantom Beast Devil Fruit user. No wonder you were so arrogant. However, I will teach you how to behave today. She suddenly rushed out of the balcony, jumped up, and landed with her sword. Thinking of this, Kosha couldn't help but feel shocked. If he stops the Marine in front of him and lets Kizaru notice the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree, then his sin will be huge. Tuanzi held the Interpreter and the Dark Chaser tightly with both hands, and the black and white swords suddenly burst into flames. Master Imperial Master has been out for many days. If you want to find him, you may have to wait a few more days. Soon there was a chaotic sound from inside, and countless guests ran out in confusion. Kizaru raised his head and glanced at the rooftop curiously, and found that the person who made the noise was actually a little girl who looked 7 or 8 years old. Come on, I also want to learn a lesson. You must know that once he transforms into Thanos form, he will be invulnerable, and every inch of skin on his body is as hard as iron, but he did not expect that a small yellow beam can make him feel pain. Who are you, and why do you want to kill someone when you disagree? Kosa was shocked at how powerful this man was and asked coldly. The more than 200 Marines behind him no longer hesitated and immediately rushed into Cayenne. After taking a step back, Kosha stabilized his figure. He immediately changed his attitude and said sideways, you can search as you like. I said that the Imperial Master is not here, but he is not here. Everyone in UD can testify. I don't need to lie to you. Chapter 110. General plays 2 dragons, Cross-Flame Dragonslayer / Above everyone's heads, an extremely hot flame instantly fell from the sky. Everyone's hair was blown by the strong wind, feeling the scorching heat above their heads, and they subconsciously took a few steps back. Kizaru once again looked surprised. What an amazing little girl. Compared to her, all the so-called geniuses in Marine can eat shit. He waved his hand casually, and a dazzling yellow beam shot straight towards the cross-flame. Boom! The cross-flame dragon slaying slash instantly collided with the yellow beam of light in the air. There was a huge noise, and all the glass on the Cayenne's facade was shattered by the huge impact, and smoke rose. Tuanzi snorted coldly, his eyes were extremely cold, and with the help of the impact from the sky, his speed became faster and faster. He held the dragon-slaying knife tightly without giving up, took a deep breath, the water flowed around his body, his waist rotated, he waved the sword with both arms at the same time, and shouted softly, breath of water star explosion air current slash. In an instant, Tuanzi's Phoenix Phantom Beast fruit ability was fully activated, and the golden and red flames wrapped around the black and white swords. The intense high temperature caused the surrounding air to twist, and the power was extremely fierce. If you still dare to search my master's home, I will chop you to death. Kizaru saw this scene and smiled softly. The yellow light beam on his feet dimmed a bit. Seeing such a talented little girl, he was not willing to kick her to death. Immediately, his entire body transformed into a yellow energy beam, which collided with Tuanzi like a ray of light. The weird speed made Tuanzi's eyes narrow. Kusha on the rooftop couldn't care less at the moment, so he leaned over and rushed down again. They knew that the National Master regarded Tuanzi's life as much more important than the Phantom Beast's spirit tree. If Tuanzi really died in front of his own eyes, he would not be able to see the Imperial Master in the future. But both Tuanzi and Kizaru were very fast. As soon as Kosha jumped off the balcony, Tuanzi's figure flew out and hit the crowd heavily. Advertisement, so fast. Tuanzi wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stood up again. He quickly waved his swords in his hands, forming afterimages. The flaming sword light flashed and he rushed towards Kizaru again. Seeing that the opportunity was not good, Kosha shouted loudly and rushed in front of Tuanzi. With a body shape like the wind, he punched Kizaru with a huge punch. The attack was fierce, like a purple cannonball. However, Kizaru saw him coming and sneered, I won't show mercy to you. The two people on the opposite side attacked at the same time. Kizaru raised his feet, yellow light flashed, and he raised them high. The figure disappeared instantly. Boom! The fists and feet collided, and invisible airwaves spread rapidly in the contact area. Kosha seemed to have been hit by a hammer of hundreds of tons. The figure flew out quickly and hit the wall of Cayenne hard, making a big hole. Dust and smoke were everywhere, and bricks were flying. At the same time, Danzi, whose whole body was burning with flames, spun the flaming sword and slashed at Kizaru again. Kizaru chuckled and did not fight back. Instead, he turned into a stream of yellow light. While dodging, he asked, Little girl, what is your master's name? With such a powerful apprentice like you, it is not easy for you to be your master. Why don't you call him over and let us compete? If I win, how about you becoming my apprentice? First General Marine. I can guarantee that you will have enough food and clothing for the rest of your life. No one dares to bully you. Tuanzi's eyes were cold, and he continued to swing the starburst flame slash, and said angrily, I am your father, but you look like a monkey, and you still want to be my master, so eat your shit. Originally, Tuanzi didn't want to talk to him, but when she heard that this was General Marine, she felt even more angry. With your strength, you are not even qualified to carry my master's shoes. If you want to fight with my master, you must defeat me first. I didn't expect that I, Kizaru, would rarely cherish my talents, but I would be looked down upon by others. Kizaru sighed as the yellow light on his feet flourished, and with the speed of light, he kicked Tuanzi directly on the forehead. Tuanzi instantly felt a huge force impact, and his body flew backwards uncontrollably. It hit the ground heavily, and someone among the nearby people accidentally caught the flames on Tuanzi, and a raging fire instantly ignited, and everyone panicked and asked everyone to put out the fire for him. When Tuanzi was about to charge forward again, Ko Sha rushed up to stop Tuanzi, holding her shoulders firmly with both hands. Tuanzi, don't be impulsive. Except for the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree, any other items are not important to the Imperial Master. This person is very strong. We just need to keep the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree. Advertisement. Only then did Kosha realize that Tuanzi had just called him up just to attack him. Tuanzi suddenly stamped his feet and looked at Kizaru with gritted teeth. If it weren't for the Fantasy Beast Spirit Tree, I would have had to fight this skinny monkey for hundreds of rounds. Yes, we will wait until the Imperial Master comes back. It has been so long. Logically speaking, the Imperial Master should be back soon. Kosha finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Tuanzi gave up the idea of taking action. However, when Kizaru looked at the two people, they suddenly stopped and looked at them doubtfully. When something goes wrong, there must be a monster. This little girl doesn't look like someone who would give up easily. Then Kizaru looked up at the location of the rooftop. They both came down from there, and since they came down, their eyes have looked there many times intentionally or unintentionally. What is there on the rooftop that is important to them? Is the Imperial Master himself up there? After killing Lieutenant General Ghost Spider, he was also injured, so he recuperated on the rooftop? Kizaru moved his feet, stepped on the moonwalk, and soared into the sky. After Kosha saw it, he suddenly screamed in his heart, not good. His legs bent, the ground suddenly exploded, and his entire body rose up from the ground. At an extremely fast speed, he was in the sky above Kizaru in an instant, and with a punch packed with ferocious power, he hit Kizaru on the head. Kizaru calmly dodged Kosa's punch, turned around in the air, raised his right foot high, and kicked Kosa's back at the speed of light. Koshajun was like a stone, hitting the ground, the earth shook, and a deep pit was made. After seeing Kizaru go up to the rooftop, Tuanzi was really anxious now. Without even looking at the thick-skinned Kosha, his whole body turned into a ball of flame, his feet rushed along the wall, and he quickly rushed to the rooftop. But no matter how fast she was still not as fast as Kizaru. When Kizaru came to the rooftop, all eyes were attracted by the small golden tree suspended in the air in front of him. He opened his mouth wide and looked ahead with dumbfounded eyes. Why did devil fruits grow on trees? Chapter 111 Helpless Efforts. Kizaru looked at the two devil fruits on the tree and found that they both exuded extremely pure energy and were definitely not ordinary devil fruits. You know, even the most common devil fruit is worth more than 100 million belly. What kind of tree is this golden tree? Is it a money tree? And being able to grow devil fruit was simply unheard of for him. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never believe it. At this time, he felt a heat wave coming from behind him, and he also lost his mind to play with the little girl. If he could hand this thing over to the Marine headquarters, then I might be able to fight for the position of the next Marine Fleet Admiral. This contribution is too great to be estimated. At this moment, Kizaru seemed to have regarded the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree as a personal property. When the little girl behind him approached him, Kizaru suddenly turned his head and pointed out, and the beam of light condensed on his fingertips. In an instant, it penetrated Tuanzi's right shoulder, and a small blood hole appeared, with blood splattering. Ah! Tuanzi screamed, and immediately felt that his entire right arm could no longer exert any strength. He loosened his palm weakly, and the dark chaser fell to the ground with a clang. Kizaru walked forward leisurely, stretched out his palm and gently touched the spiritual tree that exuded golden light, and whispered softly. You are also yellow, and I am also yellow. We are really destined. It seems that you are destined to be my little baby. Only Tuanzi was left holding the sword in his left hand and angrily shouted, Skinny monkey, you are seeking death. This is my master's, not yours. If you dare to touch it, I will kill you. On the body of the interpreter sword in her left hand, golden red flames suddenly accelerated and rose, forming a huge flaming sword 3 meters long. Tuanzi stepped forward and slashed at Kizaru with his flaming sword. Facing this extremely fierce and huge sword, Kizaru just raised his feet high. The flaming sword was blocked and suspended in midair. The air vibrated, sending out circles of invisible ripples. The branches and leaves of the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree trembled crazily under the invisible shockwave, and the two Phantom Beast devil fruits hanging on the branches began to shake violently. Kizaru's fingertips fired another yellow beam. Ah! Tuanzi let out another scream. A cloud of blood mist instantly exploded from the left shoulder, and the smell of blood gradually filled the air. The interpreter fell to the ground with a clang. Advertisement. Kizaru snorted coldly and walked towards the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree, thinking about how to move it away. At this time, Kusha suddenly appeared in front of Kizaru, punched out a punch, and hit Kizaru's chest with a fierce punch, causing Kizaru to fall back dozens of meters. General Kizaru, you can search for anything, but you can't touch this tree. Kosha looked at Kizaru and said. He then looked at the two shoulders where there were bleeding dumplings, and he couldn't help but feel guilty. With a sudden exertion, Kosha's muscles expanded again, bursting out with endless power. But what if I have to touch this tree? What can you do? Kizaru walked forward calmly, looking at the purple muscular man in front of him, and sneered. Kosha spread his arms and stood in front of the magical beast spirit tree, and said in an extremely firm tone, "You can just try it." Ah ha ha ha. Kizaru looked up to the sky and laughed as if he had heard a very funny joke. He raised his foot, and the yellow light flashed on his toes, like the speed of light, and he kicked Kosha's lower abdomen in an instant. Faced with such a fast kick, Kosha couldn't see clearly how Kizaru made the kick, let alone how to avoid it. He just grabbed the trunk of the phantom beast spirit tree with both hands. Boom. There was a muffled sound. Kosha felt that his internal organs were about to burst, and blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. Not bad. If an ordinary person had been kicked by me at the speed of light, his body would have been smashed to pieces by me. I don't know what kind of phantom beast you are that makes you so resistant to beatings. Kizaru sneered and said lazily, "I want to see how long you can last under my light speed kick." Just finished. Kizaru raised his leg again and kicked at the same speed with another light speed, hitting the same position. Kosha suddenly spurted out a mouthful of blood, and a cloud of blood mist appeared in the air. "I'll chop you to death." Tuanzi silently swallowed a fairy bean and put it in his mouth, then picked up the interpreter and the dark chaser from the ground and held them in his hands. In an instant, his whole body was ablaze. He took one step forward and slashed fiercely towards Kizaru's back. Kizaru scratched his head impatiently. What's going on? Everyone has returned immune to death. Immediately, Kizaru jumped up high, his toes shone with light, turned around with his whirlwind legs, and kicked Tuanzi suddenly. Boom. The light speed feed and Tuanzi's swords came into contact instantly, causing the air to vibrate. Advertisement Tuanzi was like a cannonball, smashing into the crowd on the ground at an extremely fast speed. People on the ground dispersed one after another as they watched Tuanzi rushing over. The ground shook, and a large deep pit appeared directly. Most of them knew Tuanzi and knew that she was the one who released fireworks on the rooftop all day long. I couldn't help but look into the pit with great concern, only to see that the little girl in the pit was covered in blood and flesh. The golden red flame that had been lingering around his body had now disappeared. Little girl, are you okay? Don't fight with that marine. If you can't beat him, you should wait for the national master. Yes, the imperial master is so wise and powerful that he is invincible in the world. He can definitely beat that marine. However, at this moment, Tuanzi's mind was so quiet that he didn't even hear what these people said. She was lying on the ground, looking up at the sky, her eyes wide and dull. Above the blue sky, white clouds like cotton candy flowed slowly. Tears flowed silently from the corners of her eyes, slid down her cheeks, and dripped onto the rubble below. Why, even though I have tried so hard, I still can't help Master. Before I met Master, I was just a waste who only drank alcohol every day. So I cherish the opportunity that Master has given me, and I seize every minute and every second to practice. Except for sleeping and eating, I spend all my time practicing. I practice hard and try to make myself stronger. I just want to prove, Master, that you are not mistaken. But why can't I even protect one of Master's trees? Tuanzi suddenly clenched his fists and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. The temperature inside the pit was rising quietly, and there were little sparks on the ground. The next moment, Tuanzi's eyes suddenly turned golden red, and his pupils disappeared. 2 balls of flame burned blazingly from her eyes. A middle-aged woman was worried about Tuanzi's injuries and wanted to go in to check. However, as soon as she entered the deep pit, she was forced to retreat by the blazing flames. The people around her looked at Tuanzi worriedly, wondering what had happened to her. In an instant, a vision suddenly appeared. A phoenix shadow 100 meters high rose from the deep pit. Chapter 112 Angel with broken wings. When the phoenix shadow that was taller than the entire Cayenne building appeared, Kizaru, who was kicking Kosha vigorously on the rooftop, also stopped and frowned slightly as he looked at the phantom of the phoenix. Below the ground, with Tuanzi as the center of the circle, a radius of 500 meters instantly turned into a sea of fire. The surrounding trees and buildings were all ablaze. A powerful heat wave spread out quickly, and all the glass on the outer wall of the Cayenne building was shattered immediately. The nearest glass melted into liquid directly under the sea of fire. There were endless screams from the ground, like purgatory. Countless people were swallowed up by the sudden sea of fire, with blazing fire burning on their bodies, crying and running aimlessly. But there were too many people around, and most of them were running around randomly, bumping into each other, and then fell to the ground, screaming, and turned into a ball of burning fire and died. Those people who were close to the pit did not even have a chance to struggle. They were directly swallowed by the sea of fire and turned into flying ashes under the scorching heat. All of this happened too suddenly, just in the blink of an eye. Too shocking. So much so that even though I had been watching the battle silently from a distance, I didn't react immediately. The sword in the tall Yisheng's hand was slowly unsheathed 10 centimeters. The next moment, all the water in a large pool not far away rose rapidly and floated in the air as if it had lost the restraint of gravity. Then he flew towards the sea of fire at an extremely fast speed. The surrounding people who were far away soon discovered the huge pool of water flying from the sky. They all opened their mouths with disbelief on their faces. Look! There is water in the sky. Everyone looked up and saw that the huge pool of water had flown over the sea of fire, then crashed down and came into contact with the sea of fire below. The smoke filled the air and produced a huge burst of water vapor. At the same time, the sea of fire also slowly dissipated. Those who survived the sea of fire quickly left here one by one. But when the water vapor dissipated, most of the people turned into charred corpses lying on the ground, with faint green smoke rising from the corpses. For a moment, the air was filled with a suffocating and disgusting burnt smell. Advertisement: The Phantom of the Phoenix shook slowly, its two golden red flame wings gently fanned, and suddenly there was a strong surge of air, bringing up gusts of wind. The stone slabs on the ground were instantly rolled up and dancing in the air. In the deep pit, Tuanzi suddenly stood up, his arms hanging down naturally and his eyes burning with red flames. The body staggered out of the pit, and every step he took would leave a trail of burning footprints on the ground. Her body stiffened, she walked out of the pit mechanically, and slowly looked up at the rooftop with an expressionless expression. There was no other consciousness in her mind at this moment, as if everything in the outside world had disappeared. Only a vague will is driving her to defeat Kizaru. Kizaru, who was standing on the edge of the rooftop, suddenly narrowed his eyes. For the first time since he came to the rainy place, he looked serious. He put his hands together, and light particles gathered in his palms. Then he slowly opened his arms and whispered softly, "Tien Kong Yun Sword." As Kizaru opened his arms, the light particles gathered faster and faster, gradually converging into a lightsaber emitting yellow light, the light surging and flickering. After Tuanzi saw Kizaru's movements, he still had no expression, like a zombie. Her back shuddered, and a pair of golden red flame wings stretched out behind her. Every feather on the flame wings was lifelike, as if it were real. Boom! As the wings trembled, a hurricane rolled up, and Tuanzi instantly flew into the sky. Tuanzi suddenly let out a miserable cry. Once again, he transformed into the Tien Kongyun sword and prepared to cut off the head of this purple-skinned man. He didn't believe that he could stand up again. Then Kizaru's body flashed, turned into a ray of light, and appeared behind Tuanzi in the blink of an eye. Without hesitation, he turned around and cut off Tuanzi's other flame wing, and Tuanzi let out another heart-rending scream. But having said that, Kizaru now really feels the pressure that threatens him. But suddenly, Kizaru's head became stiff, then he turned around and prepared to pick up the fantasy beast spirit tree. Kizaru received a huge impact and involuntarily took 3 steps back. Kizaru sighed, and no longer looked contemptuous. In fact, from the moment Kong Yunjian appeared that day, Kizaru had already regarded Tuanzi as his opponent. A yellow sword light was drawn in the air and struck on the flame wings behind Tuanzi. Advertisement: Tuanzi, holding both black and white swords, rushed towards Kizaru at the edge of the rooftop with lightning speed. But when he saw the purple man who had been kicked to pieces and bruised, he stood up covered in blood again and stood in front of him. "Get out of here." Kizaru's originally ample patience was completely wiped out. "What an amazing little girl. She can actually make devil fruits go berserk. I originally thought it was just a legend, but I didn't expect it to actually exist." Only a young man in black clothes and white hair was seen floating in the air. When Kizaru saw this young man's smile, he felt fear in his heart. A flame wing behind him was cut off by Kizaru's sword and fell into the air. Kizaru looked at Tuanzi's shaky figure and snorted coldly, not prepared to give her another chance to breathe. Kizaru put away the Tien Kongyun sword and sighed. "If I hadn't discovered this sacred tree today, I really couldn't bear to destroy such a good seedling like you." Tuanzi suddenly raised his sword and turned around, and the black and white swords collided with the Tien Kongyun sword again. The 100-meter-high phoenix shadow also dissipated in the air. The Tien Kongyun sword and the black and white swords collided together instantly, the air vibrated, and circles of invisible ripples spread outward. He held the bloody dumpling in his arms with both hands, with a cold smile on his lips. He felt the great danger behind him, enough to threaten his life, and turned around quickly in an instant. The black and white swords quickly expanded in his pupils. Kizaru snorted coldly, held his left hand empty, and another Tien Kongyun sword appeared in his hand. If other people in Marine knew about this, he would probably laugh to death if he used Tien Kongyun sword on a 7 or 8-year-old girl. The next moment, a Hokage rushed over from the front. His feet suddenly exerted force, and he slashed with his sword again. Clang! Thinking of this, Kizaru couldn't help but smile bitterly. Kizaru snorted coldly, and the light of Tien Kongyun sword in his hand suddenly surged, and he suddenly swung the sword out. The Tien Kongyun sword struck out with one strike, making a sound of breaking through the air, carrying a fierce force. Having lost his last wing, Tuanzi's body also F Chapter 113 Battle with Generals. Cheng Cheng held the dumplings in his hands, stepped on the void, and walked slowly towards the rooftop. Then he put the dumpling on the table, picked up the big holy grail in his hand, and poured the remaining water of life into the dumpling's mouth. Tuanzi, who had already lost his consciousness, muttered in a daze, Master, if someone wants to steal your tree, you will never allow it." Ko Sha was lying on the side near the fantasy beast spirit tree. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen, and his skin was torn and bruised, like a puddle of flesh. Feeling the weak aura on his body, Cheng Cheng came to Ko Sha's side in a flash. Cheng Cheng squatted down slowly, stuffed a fairy bean into his mouth, and said softly, "Have a good rest, and leave the rest to me." Then Cheng Cheng slowly pulled out the Zhenhai sword from behind. The sword was already trembling and making a buzzing sound before it was even taken out of its sheath. Holding the Zhenhai sword tightly with 5 fingers, the sword light on the sword body suddenly surged, and the blue sword light flew and entangled on the sword body, and the surrounding air seemed to be cut apart. Kizaru adjusted his sunglasses and asked in confusion, Are you the national preceptor Cheng Cheng? That's right, I am, Cheng Cheng replied simply, and then walked towards Kizaru without stopping. With every step he took, the ground beneath his feet would break a bit. Did you kill Lieutenant General Ghost Spider? Kizaru continued to ask. Cheng Cheng nodded and admitted openly. At this moment, the originally clear sky suddenly became covered with dark clouds, and strong winds blew between the sky and the earth. On the Zhenhai sword, blue sword light twined, and then strands of blue lightning appeared, like small swimming snakes. Then what? Are you going to kill me, General Kizaru? Cheng Cheng's golden eyes stared at Kizaru in front of him. Kizaru stepped back slightly, changed his expression and said, "Of course I was ordered by Marine Headquarters to investigate this matter. After all, the death of a Lieutenant General at Marine Headquarters is not a small matter. Now you know that I killed him, so do you want to kill me?" Cheng Cheng asked in a low voice. At this moment, his hair was standing upside down, turning from white to golden, and his whole body was wrapped in golden air. Kizaru smiled indifferently and said helplessly, "Can we not fight? To be honest, I don't like fighting very much. If we don't fight, I can go back and report to the headquarters, saying that there are other people who killed Lieutenant General Ghost Spider, and Alabasta's national preceptor Cheng Cheng has nothing to do with it." Cheng Cheng's eyes instantly became as cold as 10,000 years of ice. He took one step and the ground exploded instantly, sending rubble flying. "Advertisement," he said coldly. "Then have you ever thought about another possibility? Let me give you an example. That is, you will never go back to Marine Headquarters again?" The originally blue sword light on the Zhenhai sword turned into golden yellow at this moment. It suddenly rose tens of meters, toward the air, and slashed at Kizaru in front without any warning. Kizaru's body suddenly flashed, and his whole body turned into yellow light particles, trying to escape from this place to avoid its sharp edge. But how could Cheng Cheng give Huang Yuan such a chance? The Zhenhai sword light surged several meters again, until it slashed towards Huang Yuan. Kizaru hurriedly blocked the Tiankong Yun sword in front of him, and then was directly slashed away by Cheng Cheng's huge sword energy, and his body quickly retreated. His figure flew out like a sandbag. During the battle, Kizaru endured Cheng Cheng's entire set of starburst airflow slashes. The doctor asked doubtfully, "Why don't you hate her? After all, you were injured because of her." The Zhenhai sword and the Tiankong Yun sword collided together, the sword lights intertwined, and a violent explosion sounded in the sky. Then the blind middle-aged man rose up from the ground and flew to the Cayenne rooftop. "I never thought that a talented young man like you still exists in the world." Kizaru wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his hand, and his tone became a little softer. "To be able to repel General Marine with just one sword, I am afraid that the strength of the National Master is already above mine." Among the injured people below the ground, the burly Yisheng murmured. "Not good. We all know that her name is Tuanzi, and she is the only disciple of the Imperial Preceptor. My mother said that the Imperial Preceptor is a good person. Without him, our whole family would have died long ago, so I don't hate them." The little girl Ru the voice explained slowly. "Do we have to kill them all? If I really want to leave, do you think you can stop me?" Cheng Cheng would not let him leave easily. Once Kizaru leaves, the Phantom Beast's spirit tree may be exposed. By then, it may be impossible for him to be a national master in Alabasta so comfortably. At this moment, Kizaru was slashed away by the last sword, and his body was in a miserable state. The cloak of justice behind his back had already been chopped to pieces by Cheng Cheng. The yellow-striped suit was dyed with a lot of blood. One of the lenses of his sunglasses was shattered by Cheng Cheng's sword. If the tip of the sword went further, on the previous point, he might be blind in one eye at this moment. The doctor turned slightly sideways, showing no sign of anger. He bowed slightly to everyone with a calm expression and said apologetically, "I understand your wishes." In just 10 seconds, the two had already fought for more than 10 rounds. As soon as the words fell, everyone's expressions looking at the doctor turned indifferent. Advertisement. Cheng Cheng's heart suddenly sank. He was careless. The girl's mother's whole body was burned by the flames. A large area of her cheek was burned to a bloody pulp. One eye was also blinded by the fire, and her long black hair was completely burned by the fire. He completely lost the spirit of the high-spirited Marine general and became extremely bleak, with a trace of blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. He knew the effect of this Yata mirror move, and Kizaru would follow the trajectory of the light. As the owner of the shining fruit, Kizaru's speed was indeed top-notch. Clang! After Kizaru finished speaking calmly, he pinched the palms of his hands, and countless light particles instantly gathered in the center of his palms to form a light mirror, and whispered, "8 Tata's mirror." Kizaru, who transformed into particles of light, was suddenly back on the same spot, with the corner of his mouth raised and flying towards the Cayenne rooftop. Then a trail of light shot out from the mirror, quickly folding and flipping in the air at the speed of light. The trail of light shot straight into the northern sky, and Kizaru's body turned into particles of light. Today's revenge, I, Kizaru, will remember it. Cheng Cheng couldn't see his escape trajectory for a moment. The little girl who set off the fire is the great apprentice of the Imperial Master. Do you hate her? The blind doctor squatted down and asked calmly. The little girl stopped crying and choked up. We don't hate it. My mother and I just have some regrets. We should hide further away. If we left earlier, it would be fine. Go away, you are the bad guy, we don't need your help. A fat boy of 8 or 9 years old bent down, picked up the gravel on the ground, and smashed it at the doctor's head. Fujitora nodded, then stood up and looked around and asked, if any of you want revenge, I can help you kill that little girl, or the national teacher Cheng Cheng who connived at the little girl to set the fire. And she was the one with relatively minor injuries among the injured people, and at least her life was saved. In the rainy land shrouded by dark clouds, violent explosions can be heard in the air from time to time. On the other side, Cheng Cheng and Kizaru started a vigorous battle above Yudi. Cheng Cheng instantly shot out in the direction of the light's trajectory, his body like electricity. The doctor was surrounded by people burned by the flames. In front of him, a teenage girl was lying on her mother's body, crying loudly. Cheng Cheng glanced at him and sneered, "Then try it." Chapter 114. Stepping on the yellow ape, Cheng Cheng suddenly shook his feet in the air and kicked back suddenly. The air was compressed instantly, making a sound like a sonic boom. His whole body was like a bullet, quickly shooting towards the rooftop. "Kizaru, you are looking for death," Cheng Cheng shouted loudly. Originally, with the speed of Kizaru's shining fruit, he might not be able to catch up if he concentrated on escaping, but now, Kizaru actually didn't forget to go back and grab the Phantom Beast's spirit tree at this moment. It seems that Kizaru already knows the importance of the Phantom Beast's spirit tree. In this case, nothing can be done to keep Kizaru alive. Once exposed, even Cheng Cheng himself would not be able to continue to be stable, regardless of whether he could save Ace. The person in front transformed into a yellow light particle and quickly regrouped on the Cayenne rooftop. He confidently walked towards the small golden tree suspended in the air in front of him, but he found that in front of the small tree, there was a burly middle-aged blind man standing in front of him. The middle-aged blind man stood there without saying a word, holding a sword in his hand. He exuded a majestic aura that made Kizaru stop in his tracks. After watching for a while, Kizaru had some impressions. It seemed that he had seen this person before at the port. In this case, he may not be a member of the National Preceptor. Kizaru felt Cheng Cheng's breath getting closer and closer behind him, and his forehead was covered with sweat. He said anxiously, "This friend, I am Kizaru, the General of Marine Headquarters." This man killed a Lieutenant General of Marine, and allowed his apprentice to set fire to kill people in the crowd. "If you can help me, I, Kizaru, can recommend you to Marine Headquarters to join Marine and guarantee that you will be given at least a Lieutenant General position. You can resolve the grievances between your Excellency and the Imperial Master yourself, but you cannot take away this tree." Cheng Cheng slowly raised his head, and his momentum suddenly surged at this moment. He said coldly, "Although I am blind and cannot see, my heart is not blind. I can distinguish whether it is good or bad." Kizaru's eyes were cold. He raised the Tien Kongyun sword in his hand and shot out. The Tien Kongyun sword sect flashed a yellow sword light in the air and slashed hard at the blind middle-aged man. "You are seeking death yourself, so don't blame me for being rude." His whole life was calm, and he slowly pulled out the sword in his hand 3 finger widths without changing his expression. Kizaru, who had just taken a step forward, immediately felt a huge pressure coming from his body, and the ground beneath his feet cracked instantly. Advertisement. The whole person seemed to be stuck in a deep quagmire, and his movements became extremely difficult. "You stinking blind man, you are looking for death." Kizaru, who was lying on the ground, suddenly felt a burst of pain. He turned into light particles again and tried to escape. Then he felt his body sink again, and there was a cold feeling from behind. The ability of the shining fruit could no longer be activated, and his whole body felt weak, paralyzed on the ground. The ground in front collapsed instantly, and Kizaru was crushed to the ground. His cheek was pressed against the rubble on the ground, and his face was filled with blood. Whoosh. At the same time, Cheng Cheng also discovered the middle-aged blind man holding a cane and knife. Kizaru, who was lying on the ground, raised his hands at the same time and said helplessly, "You are awesome, I surrender." A cold light suddenly appeared in Cheng Cheng's pale golden eyes, and he exerted force with his right foot. Kizaru's entire head was stepped into the ground. A large hole appeared in the ground that had sunk and collapsed, and rubble tumbled. However, he himself also heard at the Marine Headquarters that Cheng Cheng, that silly boy who only practiced 2 sword moves every day, how could his strength become so terrifying now? Then Cheng Cheng grabbed Kizaru's neck and lifted him up in the air. Kizaru's whole body swayed weakly in the air and gave up the struggle. At this time, the sword will be closed again in this life. However, Cheng Cheng was still shocked when he saw that the life in front of him actually took action against Kizaru. It was worth it to see this scene. It's just that Cheng Cheng is a little confused. Since Yisheng is not Marine yet, why would he come here at this time? He shouted loudly, his body turned into light particles again, and he wanted to rush out of this gravity-filled world. Kizaru looked decadent and let out a muffled groan. A large amount of blood flowed out of his lower abdomen, completely soaking the yellow-striped shirt into blood red. Now think about it, before he left Marine Headquarters, the old guy Garp threatened him and asked him to be polite to his grandson Cheng Cheng. Now that he thinks about it, Garp was obviously protecting himself. Kizaru's eyes were filled with red bloodshot eyes, his fists were clenched tightly, and his fingers were a little white from exerting too much force. Boom. Advertisement? Fujitora. Cheng Cheng looked down at Kizaru, who was under his feet, and said indifferently, "I didn't expect that, Kizaru, you, a Marine general, was captured alive by me. If this spreads out, I'm afraid it will embarrass your Marine Headquarters. Can you achieve this kind of strength at this age?" Cheng Cheng subconsciously spoke, but soon remembered that the time was still before the Dingshang War, and Fujitora had not yet joined Marine through world recruitment. In a flash of lightning, Cheng Cheng suddenly thrust the Zhenhai sword into Kizaru's abdomen. He was nailed to the wall at the edge of the rooftop, and the wall shook with a loud bang. What a monster! Kizaru felt extremely regretful. He originally regarded this errand as a wonderful trip, but he never expected that it would turn into what it is now. Cheng Cheng originally thought that Kizaru had obtained the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree at this moment, and he was extremely anxious. However, he never expected that Kizaru lay on the ground. Then he looked at Yisheng, pretending not to recognize him, and said doubtfully, "Thank you, Senior, for your generous intervention, but I don't know who you are. Why did you appear near my spiritual tree?" Cheng Cheng ignored Kizaru, walked up to Tuanzi, gently touched her cheek, and felt relieved that her vitality was slowly returning. At this time, Cheng Cheng, holding the Zhenhai sword, had already rushed over. "Alas, I am still too young to understand what Garp really means." Cheng Cheng saw the right opportunity and inserted the Zhenhai sword directly into Huang Yuan's back, and then stepped on Huang Yuan's head with one foot. Cheng Cheng's face remained calm, as if he didn't hear Kizaru's threat at all, and he slowly pulled out the sword again to half the distance. Kizaru, who was lying on the ground, struggled hard and glared at the blind man in front of him. The current situation was urgent, and he no longer thought about it. It seemed that he should be friends rather than enemies throughout his life, otherwise it would be impossible to suppress Kizaru on the ground. Yisheng calmly said slowly, "If you are not injured, my heavy fruits will definitely not be able to trap you, but now that your body is at the end of its strength, it is not that simple to leave my hell trip." Boom. So he doesn't have the name Fujitora now. Chapter 115 Retreat. Although he had his eyes closed all his life, he habitually raised his head and looked at Cheng Cheng. As if he wanted to see through the depths of this man's heart, he remained silent for a long time before he said, "You are really strong. You can achieve such amazing strength at such a young age. To be honest, this is the first time I have seen you so talented, boy." There is no need to say these unnecessary words. I have heard them countless times. Now I am asking you, why did you appear near the spiritual tree? Cheng Cheng was chatting and laughing, but his right hand was calmly holding the Zhenhai sword. If this person had other thoughts, Cheng Cheng could not do anything to him now. It's just that after fighting Kizaru for so long now, the Super Saiyan state has greatly consumed his physical strength. I'm afraid this state can't be maintained for too long. Otherwise, even if Fujitora can summon meteorites from the sky, he is confident that he can split them with one sword. Yisheng took a step back, sat down on the chair at the back, then placed the staff and knife in his hand across the table, and said in a deep voice, "To be honest with you, Imperial Master, the reason why I came here is because I once felt something. A sacred and powerful force. It seems that it should be this golden tree now." Cheng Cheng immediately breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that Fujitora was not here to fight, so his tone became a little more relaxed. "Can't you see?" Yisheng smiled slightly and didn't care. "Although I can't see, I can still feel the color and general shape of objects through seeing and hearing color." So that's it. Only then did Cheng Cheng remember that Enel had the most extensive range of knowledge and domineering power in his life, and Enel's inner network was nothing compared to what he had in his life. After all, this person can use his power to search for meteorites from space and pull them to the ground to attack the enemy. Coupled with the fact that he has been blind all his life, his vision has undergone some powerful changes. When Yisheng heard that Cheng Cheng did not continue to ask, he continued to explain. "I can feel that the sacred power contained in this tree is enough to change the world, so I wanted to keep this tree myself at that time. If it happens once, if it falls into the hands of people with evil intentions, it will be a devastating disaster for the world." "What about now?" Cheng Cheng asked softly. Yisheng replied slowly. "I have been walking all this way. Ever since I entered the territory of Alabasta, everyone has been praising their national master. I originally thought that the national master would be a gray-haired old man, but I didn't expect you to be like this. You are young, and no one says anything bad about you. Even children as young as 5 or 6 know that their country has a kind-hearted national teacher. I traveled all the way, feeling the sacred power, and came to Udi. When I knew that you, National Master, were also in Udi, I vaguely felt that the sacred power was probably related to you. Advertisement, National Master, please rest assured. I have changed my mind now. I will not take away this spiritual tree anymore, but I will always guard it in the future. If one day, the Imperial Master uses this power to do things that harm the people, then don't blame me for being rude. I feel relieved if the Imperial Master can think this way," Yisheng said slowly. Yisheng smiled and looked at Cheng Cheng. "Wherever you go, I will be there." Among the 3 generals of Marine headquarters, which one is not a peerless overlord with superior strength? Everyone has a smile on their face. Cheng Cheng raised the corners of his mouth and looked at him sarcastically. Seeing that Kizaru under his feet was motionless, Cheng Cheng suddenly increased the force on his feet. "If you don't speak, I will kill you directly." The next afternoon, Kizaru was still the same as before, wearing a neat yellow striped suit and a new style of sunglasses. However, there were 3 extremely fine light golden lines on the back of his palms, which he intentionally or unintentionally hid in the cuffs. Below the ground, Marine, who had finished searching the Cayenne, walked out. At the same time, almost everyone's pockets were filled with gold, silver and jade. Cheng Cheng sighed helplessly. "You are indeed not bragging, and I believe you can do it, and there shouldn't be many people in the world who can stop you from destroying something. If little Alabasta dies here, he will be laughed to death if he tells anyone about it." After all, in the history of Marine, they had heard of major generals dying in battle, and also heard of lieutenant generals dying in battle, but they had never heard of senior generals dying in battle. Cheng Cheng narrowed his eyes and asked with a smile, "How can you be so rude?" Cheng Cheng asked again, "But do you know that you just suppressed a Marine general on my behalf? If nothing else happens, you will soon be wanted by the Marine government. Do you still insist on not leaving?" Young boys, retreat. However, in Cheng Cheng's impression, this guy really put the safety of the people first throughout his life. Compared with other marine generals, the later Fujitora was a marine general with a real sense of justice. Advertisement subconsciously, they believe that everything outside must be caused by their boss Kizaru, and they are not worried about Kizaru's safety. All of them still didn't see Kizaru, so they asked the people around them. Most people just said that they saw Kizaru fighting with people in the air, and then they didn't see him anymore. Hurry up! Everyone go help the injured people and send them to the hospital. You guys, go find some stretchers and come over. The people here are seriously injured. First, I kill you, and then I am put on a bounty by Marine. In this way, I can only give up my identity as Alabasta's national master and wander on the sea as a little pirate. Then Cheng Cheng walked up to Kizaru, lowered his head and looked at him expressionlessly, suddenly stepped on his forehead with his foot, and said sternly, Kizaru, I know you are awake, I won't talk nonsense, I will give it to you too, you choose your own path. If all Marines could be like Yisheng, or like Warring States Garp, Cheng Cheng felt that even if a few more Roger died in this world, the age of discovery would never come. When they came out and saw the mess outside and the many injured people, their expressions changed and they quickly ran to the side of the injured people to help them check their injuries. The confident Marines couldn't help but feel uneasy in their hearts. In this case, we are just grasshoppers in the same boat, Cheng Cheng said with a smile. In the afternoon, just when these Marines couldn't help but want to search Cayenne again, they saw Kizaru slowly walking over from the opposite street. Several Marine soldiers walking in front said quickly, and at the same time, their pockets were also the most stuffed. Cheng Cheng sighed, this guy was obviously relying on him. Yisheng said in a deep voice, although I may not be able to defeat the national preceptor, please believe that if that time comes, I will definitely destroy this spiritual tree, and I will definitely say do it. I surrender. Kizaru's weak voice came from under the floor. All my life I just sat there quietly, bowing my head and saying nothing. Second, sign a contract with me and I will let you go, but once the contract is signed, your life will always be in my hands. Chapter 116 Making Up for It Cayenne Rooftop. The setting sun spreads red light all over the balcony. Above the balcony, there was a mess, with broken ground and broken tables. There was no time to clean up these. Only the phantom beast spirit tree was still floating in the air unharmed. Tuanzi and Ko Sha put on new clothes and sat cross-legged under the fantasy beast spirit tree, their chests rising and falling, slowly recovering from their injuries. The golden light like snowflakes that kept falling from the fantasy beast spirit tree disappeared instantly after touching their bodies. As for the two phantom beast devil fruits on the phantom beast spirit tree, they had already been collected into the space ring by Cheng Cheng. Cheng Cheng smiled quietly, found a chair and sat down, crossed his legs, and asked softly, how are you two recovering? Judging from the situation, everything should be fine, right? Ko Sha opened his eyes and said slowly, I have nothing to do, thanks to the fairy beans, it's amazing that I can recover so quickly. Master, I've almost recovered, Tuanzi said softly, looking at Cheng Cheng with a somewhat evasive look. Cheng Cheng sighed and said, although the healing effect of the fairy beans itself is very good, it is also because your current defense is so amazingly strong. If it were you before, you would have been kicked by Kizaru's light speed kick. You're dead, and no amount of fairy beans can save you. Kosha shrugged and said helplessly, it's a pity that I only got beaten this time and didn't play any role, I'm really ashamed. Haha, do you know who the other person is? That's Kizaru, one of the 3 marine generals. Cheng Cheng glanced at him and saw that Kakuzu was grinning almost to the back of his ears. He said helplessly, you can protect the phantom beast spirit tree under his feet. This is already a pretty good record. Don't take advantage of it and act like a good boy. Next, Cheng Cheng looked at Tuanzi again and sighed. He has heard about Tuanzi all his life. Tuanzi went berserk and caused hundreds of people to be injured in the Sea of Fire. The dead have also been counted, and there are 85 people, the youngest of whom is a 2-year-old boy. Ever since Tuanzi woke up in the morning and found out about this, he didn't dare to look at him, and he hadn't taken the initiative to say a word until now. Since you're almost feeling well, let's go out with my teacher. Cheng Cheng stamped his feet, stood up from the chair, and walked to the balcony exit first. Advertisement. When he walked slowly to the stairs, Cheng Cheng looked at Yisheng standing aside and said, thank you for your hard work, senior. Yisheng just nodded expressionlessly and didn't say much. Tuanzi slowly stood up from under the phantom beast spirit tree, placed the interpreter, the dark chaser and the dragon slayer knife on the table, looked down at his toes and silently followed Cheng Cheng. Cheng Cheng walked all the way down the stairs and reached the lobby on the first floor, where he found that the place had slowly regained its popularity. All kinds of rich people in luxurious clothes continued to spend a lot of money here. Those who saw Cheng Cheng approaching, regardless of whether they were men or women, greeted Cheng Cheng very respectfully, and Cheng Cheng would also smile kindly in return. After walking out of the magnificent lobby on the first floor, I saw Shuya and Kabasi standing at the door and busy. Cheng Cheng stopped and thought for a moment, Shuya, come with me. Shuya glanced at Cheng Cheng, then at Tuanzi who was following silently behind, and was surprised to find that Tuanzi was not wearing a sword today. Then looking at Tuanzi's regretful eyes, she understood somewhat, nodded and agreed. Okay, I will deal with the work at hand now. Cheng Cheng glanced at the long queue that was still forming at the entrance of Cayenne, then took out 2 pieces of white paper from his jacket pocket and opened them in his palm. They were filled with densely packed names. These names were all people who were accidentally injured in the fire. Among them, those names written in red ink were those who had died. Chang Chang stretched out his hand and gently rubbed Tuanzi's head, and said calmly. Master knows that you certainly didn't mean it, but the reason why these people were killed and injured was indeed because of you, so we should face it, and we still have to go face. Master, I know I was wrong. Tuanzi still lowered his head and made a dull voice. Cheng Cheng continued. It's hard to say who is right or wrong about this kind of thing, but since they were injured because of you, let's face it together. Tuanzi raised his head, his eyes were red, looked into Cheng Cheng's eyes and nodded heavily, yeah. Not long after, Shuya trotted up to Cheng Cheng, and then the three of them walked forward slowly. Under the shining of the setting sun, the shadows of the three people were extra long. Advertisement. Cheng Cheng handed the list in his hand to Shuya. According to the list you compiled yesterday, let's go door to door. Yes, Master. Imperial Master. After Shuya took the list, she glanced at it and then walked towards the street ahead. She led the way, looking back at Cheng Cheng from time to time. Looking at his handsome face and light golden eyes, her eyes became more and more admiring. In her opinion, the people who were watching the excitement deserved to die, and they were burned to death. The chaos was already in such chaos at that time, but the people didn't leave, and they were still gathering around to watch the show. What's more, Tuanzi had already lost his mind at that time. Tuanzi could not be blamed for what happened. As for those who were injured, let them come to Cayenne and receive some compensation at most. But now it seems that the Imperial Master is obviously going to each house to apologize and give money. With Cheng Cheng's current status in this country, even if he does not make any compensation, the other people will not complain at all. For Shuya, who has lived in a slum since she was a child, she knows how rare it is for Cheng Cheng to do this. The Imperial Master truly treats poor people as living people. She couldn't help but sigh, why didn't Cheng Cheng come to this country earlier? Then he cursed secretly that he was so greedy. Soon, Shuya saw the yard in front, looked at Cheng Cheng with wavering eyes, and said softly. This is the Barnett family. Only his wife is still alive in their family. Barnett and all the boys were burned to death. Cheng Cheng nodded, looked at the closed dilapidated door, strolled forward and knocked twice. Is anyone home? Soon, I heard slow footsteps in the yard, creak. The dilapidated door slowly opened from the inside, and a slim blonde woman came out. Her face was wrapped in a thick layer of white gauze, only revealing a pair of red bloodshot eyes. When she looked at the three people at the door, her eyes widened and she hurriedly knelt down towards Cheng Cheng with a plop. Greetings to the Imperial Master, Chapter 117. Big Water Tank. Get up, no need to be polite, Cheng Cheng said softly, but the blonde woman still refused to get up and instead buried her head lower. He glanced at Shuya helplessly, and Shuya immediately walked up and helped the woman up. This time, the Imperial Preceptor came to express condolences to you, and also brought you a pension. This is 3.5 million Baileys. Keep it well. With that, Shuya placed a heavy gray package in front of the woman. The blonde woman knelt down to Cheng Cheng again, her voice choked with sobs. Thank you, Master. Thank you so much, Master. Cheng Cheng said in a deep voice. I know that these small sums of money are far from making up for the losses caused to your family, but these sums of money can at least make you live a little easier for the rest of your life. No need to thank you. This is all my duty, thanks. After hearing what Cheng Cheng said, Tuanzi immediately bowed deeply to the blonde woman. I'm sorry, everything is my fault. The blonde woman raised her head, subconsciously pulled the white scarf on her face, looked at Tuanzi with a complicated expression, and said softly. Little girl, this is not your fault. This is all the fault of my worthless husband and poor child. Life. Tuanzi just bowed his head and pursed his lips tightly, not daring to look at the blonde woman. Cheng Cheng glanced at the white silk scarf on the woman's face and asked, I heard that your face was also burned. Can you take it off and let me see it? The blonde woman hesitated for a while before nodding. She carefully and slowly pulled off the white silk scarf. The ulcerated skin was exposed, showing burnt flesh. The moment it was exposed, she immediately covered it up again. She said apologetically, I didn't scare the Imperial Master. Cheng Cheng's face was warm. You can come to the door of Cayenne tomorrow morning. I will prepare some potions to treat burns. It should be effective for your injuries. The blonde woman couldn't hold back anymore and covered her face and cried bitterly. She couldn't help but mutter, Thank you, Imperial Preceptor. Thank you, Imperial Preceptor. Cheng Cheng sighed helplessly and patted Tuanzi on the back. Tuanzi then stood up and left with his master to the next house. The blonde woman leaned against the door, watching the three of them leaving. She refused to leave for a long time, her eyes were vacant. Cheng Cheng and his party of three walked from house to house in the order on the list. In some cases, all four members of the family were burned to death, leaving only the white-haired person and the black-haired person in the courtyard. In someone's home, both husband and wife were burned. Advertisement. It was late at night. When Cheng Cheng and others went to visit the last house, they stood at the gate for a long time, but no one came out. In desperation, Cheng Cheng swept over with a domineering look and found that the courtyard of this house was complete with all daily necessities and the kitchen had plenty of rice and noodles, but only a yellow dog was left wailing. When the three of them returned to Cayenne, it was already past 1 in the morning, and even the high rollers in the casino on the first floor were slowly leaving. Cheng Cheng smiled calmly. We can only try this. Treat a dead horse as a living horse and heal them. If this can't cure their injuries, then there is nothing we can do. Back then, they saw with their own eyes that Cheng Cheng just dropped a drop on a small sapling, and the sapling turned into a towering tree in the blink of an eye. With a muffled sound, Kabasi placed the large water tank on the ground in front of Cayenne's door. I'll do some experiments first, Tuanzi said with a solemn look. He didn't even look at Cheng Cheng's cold eyes and reached out to grab the water in the tank. When he realized that he wanted to stop him, a blood-red knife edge appeared on Tuanzi's arm. Master, what are you doing? You don't want to throw it away, do you? Tuanzi said urgently. Without warning, Tuanzi suddenly pulled out the long sword from Shuya's waist and slashed his arm so fast that even Cheng Cheng didn't react. Master Imperial Master, I found the big water tank you wanted, Kabasi said without changing his expression. If the money is not spent, he will not be able to feel at ease. Cheng Cheng said helplessly. Try it, my great disciple. The golden light dissipated and the night sky returned to calm. Cheng Cheng wanted to scold Tuanzi, but when the words came to his lips, he gave up and said instead, wait a minute. Go and ask Kabasi to bring a big water tank over, the bigger the better. Cheng Cheng gritted his teeth and reached out to hand the great holy grail over the water tank. With a twist of his wrist, the clear water of life poured down. Cheng Cheng nodded, and a golden light flashed in his palm, and the great holy grail appeared in his hand. Looking at the half cup of water of life left in the great holy grail, Cheng Cheng showed a look of reluctance in his eyes. Advertisement in the blink of an eye, half of it had been poured out. After a few breaths, Shuya followed Cheng Cheng and asked cautiously, Master Imperial Master, those burns are not easy to treat. I asked the doctors in the palace a few days ago, but even they couldn't do anything. It just ensures that the festering wounds will no longer worsen. Not long after, Kabasi came over carrying a large water tank with a diameter of 1 meter. Every step he took was extremely difficult. Then Cheng Cheng and others all looked into the large water tank. No one knew what would happen. Cheng Cheng stopped and said calmly, we can't guarantee whether it will be effective now. Let's see tomorrow. I don't know if the water is useful. Let's try it tomorrow. After Cheng Cheng took a look, he turned around and headed to the Cayenne. For desert areas that often need to store water resources, this is something that is easy to find. Almost every household will prepare 1 or 2 large water tanks. Boom. After the water of life comes into contact with the water in the large water tank, it boils violently like boiling water. A thick golden light burst out from the water tank in an instant, turning the black clouds in the night sky above Cayenne into gold. Cheng Cheng estimated the amount of compensation in his mind, which was about 70 million belly. Then Cheng Cheng looked at Tuanzi with sharp eyes, gritted his teeth, stamped his feet, and poured all the remaining water of life in the great holy grail into the large water tank. Although they don't know where the water of life comes from, they know that every drop of water in it is priceless. But for those hundreds of people, it was a real life-saving money. The clear water in the water tank now has some golden dust, emitting a little light. In an instant, the golden light flourished. Kabasi and Shuya also looked at each other with regret. Both of them knew how precious this water of life was. He looked at the brightly lit casino, shook his head and sighed. The money here was probably just the winnings and losses of rich people like them in one night. Even if they lost so much money in one night, they would still be far from broken. Chapter 118 Tuanzi's punishment. Tuanzi's eyes became more and more guilty, and he lowered his head deeper. After walking to the big water tank, he carefully scooped up some water with one hand and applied it on the long wound. At this moment, her wound was still dripping with blood, her skin was turning outwards, and blood was constantly flowing out. The moment when the golden water in the water tank dripped on the wound. The blood flowing outside quickly stopped, and the wound was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a few breaths, under the watchful eyes of Cheng Cheng and the others, the wound was miraculously healed, and the skin turned white, even smoother than other parts of the skin. After seeing this expected scene, Cheng Cheng walked up and rubbed Tuanzi's head. Tomorrow morning, you will be responsible for distributing it to the injured people. With this water, their burns should be healed quickly. Healed. Tuanzi still nodded solemnly and walked slowly towards the Cayenne hall. Dumpling. Shuya suddenly stopped Tuanzi with great distress and said loudly, this is not your fault at all. You don't need to blame yourself. At that time, you were just protecting the spiritual tree of the national master. What could you have done wrong? What's more, you didn't know anything about the outside world at that time. I just want to tell you that you are not wrong. Tuanzi paused for a moment, then continued to move forward in silence. Shuya looked at Cheng Cheng worriedly and whispered, Master Imperial Master, if Tuanzi continues like this, there may be problems. She has been silent these past few days, and her favorite is strawberry cake. Cheng Cheng, who had long noticed Tuanzi's change in mood, smiled indifferently and said helplessly, there is nothing we can do about this. Although Tuanzi is usually careless, deep down in her heart, she is a person with an extremely sense of justice. For what has happened, no words can persuade those things, it just depends on whether she can figure it out herself. Shuya nodded and sighed. The person who can be accepted as a disciple by the Imperial Master cannot be that ruthless and unjust person. Then seeing Cheng Cheng looking at her strangely, Shuya quickly defended, I'm not flattering you, I'm sincere. On the side, Kabasi smiled innocently and scratched his head, Master National Preceptor, I have a suggestion, I don't know if it is right or not. Tell me about it. Cheng Cheng looked at Kabasi in surprise and said with a smile. Advertisement. At this moment, even Shuya on the side became interested. It was rare for a big man like Kabasi to put forward his own ideas. Kabasi said slowly, when I killed someone for the first time, I remember it was about the same as Tuanzi now. I didn't sleep well for several days. My mental state became worse and worse in those days. Later, Ko Sha just let me go for a walk and relax. Then, on Kusha's suggestion, I went to the royal city, which I had wanted to visit the most since I was a child. I touched the wall tiles under the royal city and then went to the port. I sat on the dock and stared at the sea in a daze for several days and nights. Then when I went back again, I found that I was fine without even realizing it. After hearing this, Cheng Cheng's eyes lit up. This seemed to be a good idea for the current Tuanzi. He took a step forward, patted Kabasi's strong muscles and said, "Not bad, Kabasi. You actually have a bright mind sometimes." Cheng Cheng took a step forward, patted Kabasi's strong muscles and said. Shuya nodded again and again beside her. "I also think this method is feasible, but it is still a bit dangerous if Tuanzi goes out alone. Although she is strong, she is still young and has little experience. I'll think about the specifics. You can go to bed first, it's getting late." After Cheng Cheng finished speaking, he walked into the Cayenne first. "By the way, Shuya, you should be responsible for distributing potions to the people tomorrow. Tuanzi probably can't do it alone." Shuya nodded in agreement. "No problem." After walking into the hall, Cheng Cheng, who was still not sleepy, did not go back to his room, but walked slowly to the rooftop. The night sky is bright and starry. Standing on the rooftop at this moment, I can't see any lights, and there is just darkness in the distance. Only the phantom beast spirit tree in front of him was shining brightly. A simple bed was added to the north corner of the rooftop. Blind Cheng Cheng was lying on it and sleeping, and he didn't know whether he fell asleep or not. Ever since he signed a contract with Kizaru that day, he has said throughout his life that he will be the guardian of this spiritual tree and will never leave it. But this is not the guardian of the phantom beast spirit tree, it should be monitoring myself. Cheng Cheng saw that his breathing was steady, and he felt that he must have fallen asleep. Advertisement. Then he looked at Kusha under the phantom beast spirit tree. Kusha had his eyes open at the moment. "Aren't you still asleep, General Thanos?" Kusha laughed at himself. "After eating that phantom beast devil fruit, for some reason, I felt like I had endless energy all over my body. I couldn't sleep at all. I always wanted to find a place to vent my energy. After being beaten half to death by Kizaru recently, let alone my insomnia, I'm getting better." Cheng Cheng shook his head and smiled bitterly. He walked to a brand new chair and sat down. He picked up the wine on the table and poured a glass. He said with emotion, "I can understand it. After all, your Thanos phantom beast species is no joke. There are only a handful of phantom beasts in this world that are stronger than this one." Asterisk a caret asterisk dollar asterisk caret. Then Cheng Cheng raised the wine glass. Under the golden light of the phantom beast spirit tree, the red grapes in the glass also had a faint golden color. After putting the wine glass to his mouth, he just stared at the wine in a daze, but had no intention of drinking it. Of course he knew that the people who were burned to death and injured could not blame Tuanzi. For him, even if those hundreds of people were all dead, what's the matter? Those people combined couldn't compare to Tuanzi's status in his heart. During the day, he went to each household to pay compensation with Tuanzi. In addition to apologizing to those people, more importantly, he wanted to relieve Tuanzi and prevent her from leaving a knot in her heart. Once the knot takes root in the heart, it will be a fatal inner demon for future Tuanzi. Inner demons are easy to arise but not easy to extinguish. Once the inner demon arises in Tuanzi's heart, in the future the world will either have one less drunken female swordswoman, or one more peerless female demon who can kill without blinking an eye. As for the method mentioned by Kabasi, although it is feasible, it cannot fundamentally solve the problem of Tuanzi. People like Tuanzi are too smart, and smart people can easily get into trouble. When Tuanzi thinks of this matter at a critical moment many years later, it will be like a bomb that explodes in her heart, causing her to suffer a fatal blow. Kosha looked at the uncharacteristic Imperial Master and asked, "Are you still worried about Tuanzi?" Cheng Cheng put down the wine glass, stood up and sighed and said, "Yes, Tuanzi once enjoyed the warmth brought by her family, and also experienced the most painful sufferings in the world. If she just relaxes through travel, let her not care about these things, it's simply impossible." Kosha squinted his eyes and frowned in thought. After a while, he said in a deep voice, "If that's the case, it seems Tuanzi needs some punishment." Chapter 119. The King of Blame. Cheng Cheng felt that Kosha's statement was very strange. He turned around and looked at Kosha, narrowed his eyes and asked, "Tell me more carefully?" Kosha also stood up, and said slowly with a serious expression, "The current Tuanzi is undoubtedly very self-blame, but it is not enough for you to replace the Tuanzi to make up for the losses of the people. On the contrary, the more you treat the people the more compensation, the more guilt Tuanzi may feel. Tuanzi must pay a certain price for this and receive a certain punishment. Only in this way can she get some relief. As for how to punish him, it's up to you, the Imperial Master. After all, you are the one who knows Tuanzi best." Cheng Cheng suddenly realized that Kosha's words really hit the essence of the matter. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. He, the person in the game, didn't realize such a simple truth at all, and he couldn't help but look at Kusha with a little more admiration. He is worthy of being the leader of the rebel army who once commanded 700,000 people. You're right. It seems that I did indulge in Tuanzi before. Perhaps this is the only way to save Tuanzi now. After Cheng Cheng finished speaking, he strolled down the balcony, his steps unintentionally brisk. His bedroom is on the top floor of Cayenne. In addition to being closer to the phantom beast spirit tree, he also likes the feeling of overlooking the entire Rainland from a high place. It's like everything is under his control. He returned to the splendid room, took off his shoes, and stepped barefoot on the snow-white fur carpet, feeling the comfort and softness brought by the carpet. The air also exudes the scent of Alabasta spices, which are used only by the top rich. It is made from precious orange blossom oil, orris, cedar, September red rose and other scents. The smell is melodious, fresh and natural, and refreshing effect. Tuanzi liked the smell of this spice the most, so her bedroom was filled with this spice. The strong smell caused Cheng Cheng to choke on it once when she went in. In the corner, there is a huge floor-standing alarm clock as tall as a person, making a slight clicking sound. It is classic and elegant. This is the only thing that Cheng Cheng is satisfied with in this room. He jumped up and lay down on the soft big bed. He opened his eyes wide and saw the ceiling covered with gold wire, and gradually fell into deep thought. How to punish Tuanzi. Advertisement. He walked quickly to Cheng Cheng, took Cheng Cheng's arm, and prayed. Master, why don't we leave here together, go find Uncle Luffy and become a pirate, and never come here again. This is a desert. Nothing to see. Cheng Cheng looked at Tuanzi's angry look and could only say to himself, Cobra, for the sake of me saving Alabasta, just take the blame for me. Last night, the king sent someone to bring news. The palace already knows what happened here, saying that so many people were injured and killed all at once. Many ministers have opinions and say that they want to arrest you. Tuanzi's face changed drastically, tears rolled down his cheeks like pearls, and the corners of his mouth twitched together. There's no hope. All the old man's money has been spent on tree planting activities, and now even he has no money. Cheng Cheng said with a grimace, looking at Tuanzi with a look of reluctance. Isn't that true? I also told His Majesty the King so, but he said that the compensation we gave was too little. Each family must pay at least 30 million belly. But master, I have no money now. Normally, Cheng Cheng would not get up at this time, only after 8 o'clock would he get up slowly. However, although the king did not issue an order to arrest you, he also issued a notice to expel you because he felt that if you continued to stay in this country, you would harm his people. Tuanzi's heart suddenly tightened, he stamped his feet suddenly, and said angrily, how could the king do this? Master, didn't you pay them compensation? And those injured people, even their burns will be cured today, why are you expelling me? Cheng Cheng said calmly, however, although His Majesty the King did not agree, he also issued a warning to you. Considering your young age, he did not send the army to arrest you. Otherwise, you would be in prison now. Kosha and Yisheng stood calmly in the back, with no expression on their faces. Even Shuya and Kabasi, who rarely went to the balcony, were looking at her silently. Unexpectedly, Cheng Cheng was already standing under the fantasy beast spirit tree, looking at her solemnly. Is there really a need for punishment? Cheng Cheng sighed and said, the king will expel you from Alabasta by tomorrow at the latest. As soon as he climbed the stairs, Tuanzi stopped and stared blankly ahead. Cheng Cheng rubbed Tuanzi's head reluctantly. I also want to accompany you to roam the sea, but as a teacher, I have to plant trees here. You should know how important the phantom beast spirit tree is to us. The breeze was gentle, and the sky gradually revealed the dawn from the night. Advertisement in the misty air, the desert in the distance could not be seen clearly, and crystal clear dewdrops hung on the golden branches and leaves of the fantasy beast spirit tree. Shuya took a step forward and looked at Tuanzi with the same pain. In the past few days, the casino's business has not been good. Not only has it not made any money, but it has also been losing money every day. We haven't made any money for a long time. Since living in Cayenne, she has become accustomed to getting up early to practice sword practice at this time, and it is unstoppable. Tuanzi walked onto the balcony expressionlessly, with 3 long swords slung around his waist that clanged together as they moved. She is obviously still just a child. He also said that if he finds that you have injured others outside, he will banish you forever and prevent you from even stepping into Alabasta. The atmosphere became extremely solemn. It was obviously early morning, but there was a sign that a storm was coming. That night, I tossed and turned, and I don't know how long it took before Cheng Cheng finally passed away. She lowered her head, not daring to look at Cheng Cheng's serious gaze. She clasped her hands together, and sweat suddenly appeared on her palms. She said nervously, Master, what's the matter? Really? Why don't I? The next day. Tuanzi looked at his master's serious expression and his heart sank. Did he do something wrong again? Tuanzi glanced at Kabasi silently. His expression became even lower, and he looked at the railing behind him slumpily, clenched the dragon-slaying knife in his hand, and asked cautiously, Master, how long will it take for the king to expel me? Cheng Cheng quickly said, but for my sake, His Majesty the King shortened this time to 1 year. He also said that as long as you don't hurt anyone outside for a year, he will consider letting you come back early. 2 years. Cheng Cheng held out 2 fingers. Tuanzi's face improved a little, but she couldn't help but feel disappointed when she thought about not being able to fight outside for a year. Tuanzi's eyes immediately turned red and he said nervously, Master, can you still borrow some money? Where's Lao Tu? Don't Lao Tu have money? Let's borrow some from Lao Tu first. Just as Kabas was about to speak, Shuya secretly pinched the flesh on his waist, causing him to scream in pain. Chapter 120 Heavy Snow Demon Bear. After the bad news came that was more terrifying than death for Tuanzi. Tuanzi felt that the whole world had become dim. At this moment, her world lost its color and turned into a world of only black, white and gray. Her breathing became rapid, and she felt as if she was suffocating, and there were waves of pain in her heart. Do I really want to leave Master for a year? Will Master still recognize himself after 1 year? After 1 year, will Master still feel sorry for me? After thinking of these, endless thoughts rushed towards her heart. She bit her lip tightly, a thin trail of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth, and her white teeth were dyed red. She clasped her hands tightly together, shedding tears, but not letting herself cry out. Choking with sobs, she begged Master for the first time. Master, can you not leave? Cheng Cheng swayed, turned his head away from Tuanzi, and said firmly, "No, you have grown up, and you must be punished for your mistakes. Don't worry, Tuanzi. Master has already found a good place for you in advance, letting you stay with your master Garp. He is Master's grandfather, a very good old man, and the person Master respects the most. By his side, no one will dare to bully you if you don't fight." Kabasi, who was standing aside, was full of doubts. He didn't understand why the national preceptor would do this. With his influence in Alabasta, he only accidentally injured hundreds of people. How could the king issue such a strange order? Besides, he had never heard of when the king issued this order. However, feeling a heartbreaking pain in his waist from time to time, Kabasi chose to shut up. Silence is golden. Shuya stood behind Kabasi, resisting the urge to tell Tuanzi the truth, and looked at Tuanzi silently. There was both distress and envy in his eyes. "Tuanzi, do you know how much your master feels sorry for you, so he made this decision? It doesn't matter if you don't understand now. When you grow up, one day you will understand that your master is doing everything for you today." Yishun leaned against the corner with a solemn expression, silently listening to their conversation. He didn't say a word from beginning to end, but kept tapping the staff and knife in his hand with his 2 fingers. Kosha frowned and looked at the mist that was gradually dissipating in the distance. Advertisement. After hearing Cheng Cheng's explanation and knowing that he was going to be with his master's grandfather, Tuanzi felt a little better. He wiped the tears on his face and said firmly with his eyes, "Master, don't worry, I will never do this when I'm with my master. Fighting. I will come back in a year." Then he reluctantly took off the 3 swords from his waist and put them on the table gently. "Master, you have to keep them safe for me during the year I leave. In order to prove that I didn't fight, I won't take them with me. Also, my room cannot be occupied by others. If anyone occupies my room, I will be the first to hack him to death when I come back tomorrow." Cheng Cheng shook his head with a wry smile, walked to the table, picked up the 3 swords, and handed them to Tuanzi again. "You are my eldest disciple, the eldest disciple of the mountain. There is no reason why you are not worthy of a sword. You have to practice swordsmanship every day. Don't worry, this is not a life and death separation. Maybe the king will think about it after half a year, or something terrible happens in the meantime, and I will go and take you back." Tuanzi hugged the 3 swords in his arms tightly and nodded heavily. "Shuya, help Tuanzi pick out some changes of clothes and pack the luggage," Cheng Cheng said to Shuya behind him. Without saying anything, Shuya took Tuanzi's hand and walked slowly down the balcony. Kabasi scratched his head and prepared to go down. Cheng Cheng suddenly said, "Kabas, wait." Kabasi looked back in confusion and saw Cheng Cheng holding 2 devil fruits in his hands. One is golden and glows with golden light, and the other has black and white stripes. Cheng Cheng said calmly, "Choose one. You can choose between the 2. I don't know what kind of phantom beast you will eat." At this important moment of decision, Kabasi only hesitated for a moment before reaching out for the devil fruit with black and white stripes. Cheng Cheng's face was solemn. He was not in the mood to ask Kabasi why he chose this. He just stared at the rising sun in the distance with dull eyes. "I don't know whether this choice is right or wrong." Kabasi on the side opened his mouth wide, held the devil fruit in both hands and started chewing it, just like eating a watermelon. After 3 or 2 mouthfuls, the black and white devil fruit was swallowed by Kabasi, and white liquid flowed out of the corner of his mouth. The moment he saw this scene, Cheng Cheng felt a chill in his heart. Advertisement. I quickly turned around to look at the bright sun, which was not dazzling, and rubbed my eyes. Kabasi grinned, showing his white teeth, and sighed. "This thing is a bit fishy, it doesn't taste good." Seeing that Cheng Cheng ignored him, he felt a little bored and was about to go downstairs. At this time, he felt a heat in his body. There is an indescribable feeling stuck in the chest. The chest is getting more and more stuffy, and there is a strong desire in the heart to yell out to vent. "Ah, ah, ah, wow," Kabasi shouted to the sky, his voice rising into the sky. Suddenly hearing Kabasi's shouting, Cheng Cheng thought he was being attacked by someone. He quickly turned around and looked over, holding a turtle-style qigong with one hand and getting ready to go. I saw that Kabasi's entire body suddenly became taller, his black suit was torn, long silver-white hair slowly grew out of his body, and his face gradually became distorted, turning into the appearance of a bear. After a few breaths, Kabasi, who was originally very burly, turned into a 3-meter-tall white giant bear with a light blue fierce light in his eyes. "Is this a bear?" Cheng Cheng swallowed and said in shock. But thinking about Kabasi's body shape, he secretly said, "This is quite suitable." Master National Preceptor, what's wrong with me?" Kabasi stretched out his hand in shock, looked at the changes in his palms and body, and shouted loudly. Cheng Cheng was speechless for a moment and sighed. "You are just a fool who has a stupid blessing. There is nothing wrong with you. You just ate the phantom beast seed fruit and transformed." It's similar to Kosha's situation. Kusha on the side also looked at Kabasi with his mouth wide open. He stepped forward and touched the long snow-white hair on Kabasi's body. He felt envious and said, "Kabas, you are awesome. You are a big bear. You are much more handsome than me. Bar." The big bear grinned, showing its thick fangs, and said in a simple and honest voice, "It's okay." Cheng Cheng said from the side, "We still need to give Kabasi's phantom beast a name, and it can't really be called a big bear. I don't have much education. I didn't even go to junior high school. I'd better give it a name, the National Preceptor." Big Bear scratched his head and said. Cheng Cheng pondered for a while and then said, "Since the fur on the body is white, let's call it the Snow Demon Bear." Chapter 121 Treatment. Kabasi smiled innocently and repeated excitedly, Snow Demon Bear. This name is really domineering, I like it. As soon as he stamped his feet, the entire balcony could feel a slight shaking. Kosha walked slowly to Kabasi. His head just reached the waist of the big Snow Demon Bear, and lightly hammered the big white bear. Let's go out and practice. Let's see if you, the big bear, are better than I, Thanos. The general is awesome. Kabas immediately cried and said with a look of reluctance, Kosa, isn't this bad? Kosha punched him again. What's wrong? Let's go. After saying that, Kosha jumped up and jumped off the balcony first. Boom. Then there was a muffled sound, and a deep pit appeared on the ground. Cheng Cheng shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly. In Kosha's words, he was rough-skinned and thick-muscled anyway, so it would be no big deal if he fell. Going downstairs like this was much faster than walking up the stairs, and he could also use it to beat his muscles and bones, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Seeing Kabasi walking to the balcony and eager to try, Cheng Cheng quickly stopped him. Don't jump, I'm afraid it will affect the foundation of the Cayenne if you smash your 3-meter-high bear. Oh, then I'd better take the stairs. Kabasi responded disappointedly, then turned and walked towards the stairs. But as soon as he reached the stairs, Kabasi's huge figure was stuck. He just exerted a little force, and the rock wall at the edge of the stairs was squeezed out of shape. Kabas, change back first and then go down, Cheng Cheng said helplessly. Kabasi turned around with difficulty, looked at Cheng Cheng with confusion and asked, Master National Preceptor, how do you change back? In an instant, Cheng Cheng felt dizzy and looked at him dumbfounded. He strolled up behind Kabasi and raised his leg to give him a kick. Ko Sha, you come on down below, Cheng Cheng shouted. Kabasi's huge figure drew an arc in the air and fell to the ground. Boom. A louder sound came, and the entire Cayenne building shook slightly. The people who gathered at the door were slightly shocked. At this moment, he and Yisheng were the only 2 people left on the balcony. Hey, there's no one around to help. It seems like I, the boss, have to do it myself to distribute potions to them, Cheng Cheng said with emotion. Advertisement. He jumped up, stepped on moonwalk, and fell down lightly. The life in the corner had a dull expression, tiptoeing a little, and his figure was like a sparrow, and he also floated to the ground. Cheng Cheng asked doubtfully, Senior, aren't you up there guarding the Phantom Beast spirit tree? Yisheng said calmly, it's the same down there. Then he turned his head and looked at the casino in the lobby on the first floor, frowning slightly. It seems like you, a casino veteran, can't help it anymore. Cheng Cheng smiled slightly. For such a gambling addict, Cayenne is definitely a paradise. As for whether I stayed here because of the Phantom Beast spirit tree or because of the largest casino in Alabasta, it's hard to say. Cheng Cheng smiled calmly and asked knowingly, Senior, do you also like this? He looked serious and nodded slightly. I just understand a little bit. In some severe cases, the skin on the entire body is rotten and swollen and red, which looks extremely scary. Sure enough, no gambler can resist the temptation of Cayenne. Those people had often queued up to receive saplings these days, and now they had the same experience queuing up, so they naturally formed the queue in an orderly manner. At the front of the team is a mother and daughter. The 5 or 6-year-old girl has a tiny scar on her cheek, Madara, and a red scar on her fair arm that was burned by the fire. Although it does not affect the normal movement of the arm, it is very serious for a little girl. Extremely important for girls. No matter how serious the injuries of these people were, they all looked at Cheng Cheng expectantly, wondering in their hearts, is it true that the Imperial Preceptor said yesterday that he could cure their burns? The young mother's head was tightly wrapped in a white silk scarf, half of her face was covered by the silk scarf, and her head was completely burned off, leaving her with a bald head. Taking 2 steps forward, Cheng Cheng stood in front of the large water tank, lifted up the wooden board covering the large water tank, and placed it on the ground aside. Cheng Cheng smiled and said, Let your daughter come first, it's okay, everything will pass. Suddenly a fragrance filled the air. The woman behind her was looking at her daughter's arms intently, not daring to express her anger. The ladies standing in line at the front looked at Cheng Cheng gratefully. The largest casino in Alabasta seems to be famous. Advertisement, come all over, line up, ladies first, Cheng Cheng said loudly. Cheng Cheng chuckled. The little girl's eyes were so pierced that she couldn't open her eyes and could only turn her head. Whenever there is a war, the most seriously injured and the most innocent people are probably these little people. He became more respectful and bowed. Please come in quickly, I will arrange the best seat for you right away. Cheng Cheng sighed. The city gate was on fire and the fish in the pond could not be more affected than this. The young mother looked at Cheng Cheng with evasive eyes, her body stiffened, and her hands were tightly placed on her daughter. Cheng Cheng smiled quietly and did not answer. He just slowly raised his wrist, put his index and middle fingers together to make sword fingers, and twisted his wrist. In that case, we're all here. Why don't you, Senior, come in and have some fun? If you win, it's yours. If you lose, it's mine. It can also be considered a thank you gift to Senior for your kindness, Cheng Cheng said with a smile. There are also some unlucky women who cover their faces with silk scarves and cover them with their hands. The women in the queue behind them all stood on tiptoes and tried to look forward. A ball of clear water slowly rose into the sky in the large water tank. The thin water circled in the air, moving with extraordinary agility, and swept towards the injured part of the little girl's arm. Master National Preceptor, can my and my mother's burns really be cured? The girl blinked and asked worriedly. However, out of respect and awe for Cheng Cheng, They only discussed the biggest question in their hearts in low voices on the way here. When they actually stood in front of Cheng Cheng, no one dared to question it. Hans, go and arrange for someone to take the seniors in to play a few games and visit. Cheng Cheng patted Hans on the shoulder and said. More and more people were gathering in the front. Most of these people were injured in the fire, and everyone had more or less burn marks on their bodies. Cheng Cheng clenched the stick knife in his hand and muttered. Gambling is a kind of fun for me. If this is the case, the fun of the game itself will be lost. Hearing the kind words of the Imperial Master, Hans, who had been wandering among the rich in the casino for many years, could not recognize Cheng Cheng's meaning and instantly understood the importance of the blind middle-aged man in front of him. Cheng Cheng stood at the door, thought for a while, and followed Hans in. Cheng Cheng, who had just mentioned it casually, didn't expect that he would really agree in his life. The festering, red and swollen arm immediately emitted a brilliant golden light after it came into contact with the water flow. As soon as he waved, the deputy store manager Hans trotted over and stood respectfully behind Cheng Cheng. Chapter 122. 2 glasses of water. The golden light slowly dissipated, revealing the little girl's slender white arms. The little girl's mother covered her mouth tightly to prevent herself from making any sound, and tears welled up in her eyes. Mom, I'm recovered. The girl turned around and jumped up excitedly, hugging her mother tightly and shouting happily. The woman rubbed her daughter's hair affectionately. Yes, she has recovered. Why don't you thank the Imperial Master quickly? Without saying a word, the girl knelt down towards Cheng Cheng and kowtowed. Thank you, Master Imperial Master. The crowd lining up at the back burst into cheers instantly, and even those behind who didn't see what happened had some guesses in their minds. The countless eyes looking at Cheng Cheng became even hotter. Especially those ladies in the front row, their eyes have regained the brilliance of hope. For them, if they are disfigured, they will undoubtedly live in darkness for the rest of their lives. But now, the dawn seems to be rising again. When the girl stood up and was about to stand aside, Cheng Cheng called out to her, smiled slightly, twirled his fingers, and a ball of cherry-sized water droplets flew out from the large water tank, covering the little girl's cheeks, forming a layer of water film. A faint golden light flashed, and all the spots on the little girl's face disappeared, and her skin became as white as jade. The little girl had a confused look on her face, and something had changed unseen on her face. She looked at the Imperial Master in confusion, and then turned to look at her mother behind her. The woman suddenly cried with joy and was about to kneel down and kowtow to Cheng Cheng to thank her, but Cheng Cheng stopped her. He smiled and said, Stop kowtowing. Let's hurry up. There are still a lot of people waiting in line behind us. Don't let them wait too long. If each of you kowtows to me, the people behind you will be anxious. Everyone lined up in an orderly manner, and before noon, all the treatment for the hundreds of burned people had been completed. Not only were the burn scars healed by the people, but other scars on some women were also directly eliminated by Cheng Cheng. This made all the women extremely excited and looked at the Imperial Master with gratitude. However, those rough men did not receive such treatment. Cheng Cheng only healed his burns. In the words of the Master, scars are a man's medal and the highest honor given by God. At the end, there was still half of the water left in the big water tank. Cheng Cheng thought that he couldn't let it go to waste. He lifted the big water tank with one hand and stepped on the moonwalk to reach the rooftop. Advertisement. The large water tank weighing hundreds of kilograms seemed to be nothing in Cheng Cheng's hands, and it was completed in one go. He poured water on the magical beast spirit tree suspended in the air. In an instant, the phantom beast spirit tree emitted a faint golden light, but there were a few more branches and leaves on the branches, and it had no intention of growing devil fruits. Cheng Cheng sighed inwardly. As expected, the effect of the diluted water of life was much worse. He sat backwards on the chair and slowly poured a glass of wine. However, after finishing the pouring, Cheng Cheng lost interest in drinking again. Unknowingly, Tuanzi has been with him for more than a month. When he thinks about not having this chattering disciple around him, he feels a little empty in his heart. However, no matter how aggressive Tuanzi is, he will probably have to restrain himself when he is around Grandpa Garp. After all, Garp's fists are no joke. Even with Cheng Cheng's current strength, thinking about Garp's fists still gives him a headache. Iron Fist, Iron Fist. Where is the Iron Fist? It is the world-destroying fist that penetrates the sky. If a superhuman Saitama Phantom Beast occasionally grows on the Phantom Tree in the future, and Grandpa Garp eats it, that punch will really destroy the world. Cheng Cheng looked at the wine glass in front of him, his heart moved slightly, his face beamed with joy, and he hurriedly took out the Great Holy Grail from the space ring. The water of life in the Great Holy Grail slowly rose at a speed visible to the naked eye unprecedentedly. In a few breaths, the water of life that had been consumed yesterday was already full and was about to overflow the cup. Cheng Cheng stood up without hesitation and poured all the water of life onto the Fantasy Beast Spirit Tree. The Golden Phantom Beast Spirit Tree suddenly burst into golden light, like a golden sun falling into the world. The trunk of the tree swayed and slowly rose, and new branches and leaves gradually grew on the branches. The Phantom Beast Spirit Tree, which was originally only as thick as an arm, is now larger. What made Cheng Cheng slightly disappointed was that the Spirit Tree only grew bigger and did not grow new devil fruits. Just when he wanted to comfort himself, everything rotted in the pot, and it was all his own consumption, so there was nothing to feel bad about. Then he stared at the Great Holy Grail on the table with wide eyes. The water of life is still rising, no slower than before. Advertisement. Cheng Cheng smiled quietly and quickly figured out the key. If nothing unexpected happened, these wishes should come from the people who were burned. After a few more breaths, Cheng Cheng poured the second cup of water of life onto the phantom spirit tree. In an instant, golden light shot into the sky, like a sharp sword breaking through the white clouds. Two golden buds bloomed at the top of the fantasy beast spirit tree at the same time. The flowers bloomed and fell, and soon condensed into two devil fruits. One of them is completely snow white with cyan swirls on the surface like a cantaloupe. The other one is completely gray with light golden stripes and looks a bit like a banana. Just looking at the appearance, it is far less beautiful than the snow white one. Cheng Cheng turned his head and looked at the great holy grail, hoping to fill the cup with water of life again. In this way, he would directly possess 4 phantom beast devil fruits, but his wish was good. The great holy grail was extremely quiet, with no reaction at all. Cheng Cheng shook his head and smiled. His mood finally improved a little. He picked up the glass of wine and drank it in one gulp. Man, you really shouldn't be too greedy. Time flies and it's afternoon. Tuanzi, who was carrying a large luggage and with 3 swords slung across his waist, had adjusted his mood at this moment, but his eyes were slightly red. She slowly walked up to her master, raised her smile, and said to him, "Master, don't worry, I will definitely not fight after I get to Master Garp, but Master, you can't forget me." Cheng Cheng smiled and said, "Don't say goodbye in a hurry, Master will send you to Marine headquarters, otherwise you will not be able to get there alone." Then he said to Kosha and Kabasi, "I should go out very quickly this time and be back within a week. Just take good care of Cayenne." Then he took out the remaining 3 devil fruits and said to Shuya, "Choose one. Whether it is good or bad depends on your luck. But so far, it seems that the ones chosen by Kosa and Kabasi are pretty good. No matter how bad it is, it can't be any worse." Shuya, who had been obsessed with devil fruit for a long time, immediately had a moving light in her eyes. After she heard that Kabasi had eaten devil fruit, she complained a lot to the National Master. But when she saw Kabasi's big bear look, she suddenly felt a little happy. If she had transformed into this, she would be ugly as well. Shuya stared at the 3 devil fruits for a while, then firmly moved towards the snow white devil fruit and held it carefully in her hands. Cheng Cheng smiled and asked, "How do you choose this one?" Shuya raised her eyebrows and said, "This is what a woman feels like." Chapter 123 The Emperor of Blame. Cheng Cheng smiled and said, "Then I'll see how accurate your feeling is when I come back." Then Cheng Cheng looked at Yisheng next to him and said slowly, "I will be troublesome for seniors in the past few days since I left." With his eyes closed all his life, he could not help but sigh as he touched the thick banknotes he had won in the casino that morning in his sleeves. In this world, it turns out that there are really people who love the people and treat them kindly. In the past, he did not believe that such people could exist in this world full of ugliness. Many years ago, I even chose to close my eyes because I didn't want to see too many shameless and dirty people in the world, and I often sighed. It is a blessing in life not to see things. However, he felt something different in Cheng Cheng. When he first stepped into the dock of Alabasta, he learned from the boy and others that there was a wise German teacher in this country and he was a great good man. At that time, I sneered in my heart that there were no real good people in this world, they were just pretending. But later when he asked the people who were saved from the fire if they resented Tuanzi who set fire to them and burned them, those people couldn't feel any resentment towards Tuanzi just because Tuanzi was the apprentice of the National Master. The reason is not because of fear, but because of respect for this National Master. Then I spent my whole life filled with doubts, trying to figure out the reason for all this, and what earth-shattering deeds had this great master, who was loved by all the people, done. He asked the people about Cheng Cheng's past. Only then did I learn that in order to save the country from danger, Cheng Cheng defeated Crocodile, one of the Shichibukai, and in order to help the poor people, he even initiated a plan to let people plant trees to spread wealth. In his opinion, this is nothing more than asking the people to pick up money with sacks. The imperial preceptor just puts the money on the ground and asks them to pick it up. Is there anything simpler than this in the world? I was originally worried that the spiritual tree would fall into the hands of people with evil intentions, but I resolutely changed my initial thoughts. The holy things of heaven and earth are inhabited by the virtuous. In his opinion, the National Master Cheng Cheng obviously has this qualification. However, no matter how good people are, they will change, especially when it comes to relatives around them. They will often choose the favorable side of relatives and friends. Advertisement. In his original thoughts, the Imperial Master would only make simple compensation to the casualties. After all, he had been watching the battle and knew that Tuanzi had indeed lost consciousness at that time. He did not expect that not only did the Imperial Master personally go door to door to make compensation, but he also consumed the precious and vital water to treat those people. He even cruelly punished Tuanzi in the most severe way. Not to mention other things, if one spends his whole life in a top-level war and throws 1 or 200 extraterrestrial meteorites at the Marine headquarters, all problems will be solved and there will be no need to fight this war. Kizaru had just returned to Marine headquarters and immediately came to Fleet Admiral Sengoku to report. After all, he went out with a mission this time. Master National Preceptor, please rest assured, I understand the seriousness of the matter. Kosha nodded. Thinking of this, a rare smile appeared at the corner of Yisheng's mouth, and he tried to open his eyes, but because he hadn't opened them for too long, his eyes opened with a tiny gap, and only the whites of his eyes were exposed. Garp was sitting in a chair and was drowsy. He felt a strong sleepiness coming over his body. When he was about to close his eyes and sleep, he saw Kizaru, who had gone out to perform a mission, come back, and he immediately became energetic. Warring States stroked his glasses and asked, "Have you found out who did it?" Cheng Cheng shouted a somersault cloud into the sky, and soon a rapidly flying golden cloud appeared in the distance. Kizaru put his hands in his trouser pockets, found a chair at random, sat down, and said lazily, "Of course not. How old is the National Master Cheng Cheng? There is another person who killed Lieutenant General Ghost Spider." After saying that, regardless of whether Cheng Cheng agreed or not, he strolled forward. The smile on Yisheng's lips became even brighter. He slowly took a step forward and said with a soft smile, "I'm leaving. I'm no longer needed here." Looking at the departing figure of Yisheng, Cheng Cheng couldn't help sighing, and felt a little regretful that he still didn't keep this person after all. If he was willing to stay, it would definitely be a big help to him in the future. "Kusha, while I'm gone, you can train Kabas properly. His snow demonic bear phantom beast species still has great potential. As for Shuya's phantom beast species, I'll take a look at it after I come back." "Kizaru, how was your trip? The person who killed the ghost spider shouldn't be my grandson, right?" Garp asked eagerly. "The highest level Warring States office. It would be nice if these eyes were not closed. I really want to open them and see what you look like. You should have a very gentle face, right?" After Warring States thought about Luo's identity, he had no doubts about Kizaru's statement. After all, it was indeed unbelievable to say that a young man under 20 years old killed Lieutenant General Ghost Spider. Advertisement: no fighting allowed for 1 year and expelled from Alabasta. Since the spiritual tree belongs to such a person, there is no need for me to stay here shamelessly and be a bad guest. Cheng Cheng took Tuanzi on the soft somersault cloud, said goodbye to everyone, and left quickly. Marine Headquarters. Although I am addicted to gambling, it is just a hobby after all. In my mind, there is no distinction between big and small casinos. If you don't dislike it, Senior will regard this place as his home and will live here in the future. I don't believe there is any casino other than Cayenne where Senior can have a great time. The corner of Kizaru's mouth couldn't help but twitch, and he forced a smile. "Yes, your grandson is quite nice. You see, I have long said that my grandson Cheng Cheng is a kind man and will not kill a Marine Lieutenant General. This is undoubtedly a huge punishment for a little girl who loves swords as much as her life." He slammed the table and said in a deep voice, "Immediately increase the bounty on Trafalgar Law. We cannot let this person continue to be at large." Cheng Cheng was slightly startled and chuckled. "Senior, there is such a luxurious casino here, are you really willing to leave? Let's go. I believe we will meet again in the future." Soon the somersault cloud landed on Cheng Cheng's waist, suspended in midair. Sengoku, who was sitting against the wall, didn't speak, just thinking about the name of the pirate. Garp on the side laughed loudly, patted Kizaru's shoulder hard and said, "I found out, it seems like it was done by Trafalgar Law of the Hard Pirates. This person is a user with the ability of the surgical fruit. His strength is average, but his ability to escape is not small. He ran away after being kicked by me," Kizaru said calmly. The domineering aura of a lifetime of knowledge spread instantly and enveloped the entire Rainland. It was discovered that every citizen was grateful to the Imperial Master without any distracting thoughts. Cheng Cheng said calmly, "If there are still people who come to snatch the Phantom Beast Spirit Tree, if you can't defeat it, please let me know. I will carry a phone bug with me this time. Don't show mercy to the little robber thieves I meet who can defeat it, just clean it up." Hearing this unfamiliar word, Yisheng's hand that clenched the cane and knife suddenly tightened, and then quickly released it, sighing. "I'm used to wandering alone, so let's forget it." The physically and mentally exhausted Tuanzi soon felt a strong drowsiness, lying on his knees, and fell asleep soon. Chapter 124. Garp and Tuanzi 3 days later. In the blue sky, a golden cloud crossed the sky and fell on the stone steps in front of the Marine headquarters. At the port ahead, battleships lined up neatly docked on the shore. The surrounding Marines turned their heads in confusion after seeing the golden clouds. Cheng Cheng walked down the somersault cloud with the dumplings, one big and one small. Before he could say anything, a skinny Marine walking around asked him at gunpoint, "Who are you? What are you doing here at Marine headquarters?" Cheng Cheng looked at the man holding the gun and smiled and said, "I'm just here to find relatives. Garp is my grandfather." Marine, who was as thin as a monkey, was quickly pressed down by the people around him. He patted his head and said angrily, "This is our famous Marine Cheng Cheng. Don't you recognize it yet?" The skinny Marine looked at Cheng Cheng, especially after seeing his white hair. He suddenly realized and finally remembered who Cheng Cheng was. Cheng Cheng smiled and said, "I am no longer Marine, so I won't go in. I also hope that you will inform Garp and say that I will wait for him here." Marine on the side immediately agreed, "No problem, I will inform you now." With that said, he took out the phone bug in his pocket, walked to the side and dialed the number. After saying a few words there briefly, he walked over and said to Cheng Cheng again, "It has been announced. You can walk around outside. Lieutenant General Garp should be here soon." Cheng Cheng smiled slightly, nodded and thanked him, and sat down on a stone bench with Tuanzi. After these days of adjustment, Tuanzi gradually accepted the reality of living here, and his mentality was not as sad as in the first few days. He looked at Master with wide eyes and said, "Master, don't worry, I will stay here honestly for 1 year. I will definitely not cause you any trouble again. It's okay. It may not take half a year for the king to change his mind and ask me to take you back. Do you think so?" Cheng Cheng rubbed Tuanzi's head and said with a smile. Tuanzi's face turned red for a moment. She didn't expect that this rough old man could talk quite well, and she instantly developed a good impression of Garp. She also thought that this old man was her master's grandfather, her master, but there has to be some respect. Advertisement is expected of my old Ka family. If you wear a sword and learn martial arts, then you can become a Marine general, right? Garp instantly grinned and praised loudly with a smile. "Grandson, is this your daughter? I never expected that I, Garp, would still be alive to see my great-granddaughter. Now that I know it, Master, don't worry, I will never fight, Tuanzi said sincerely. At the gate of Marine headquarters, Garp rushed forward at an extremely fast speed with a hurried look on his face, attracting shocked looks from others along the way. Cheng Cheng stood up, looked at the two people who were relatively harmonious, and said, Grandpa Garp, I have something to do recently, so I will leave Tuanzi to you first. Also, let me tell you, don't even think about letting Tuanzi join Marine. It's just that the watch chain is too long. If it wasn't held tightly by Tuanzi, it would have slipped to the ground, which looked extremely funny. But when you get to the Marine headquarters, it's best not to fight. If anyone bullies you, just talk to Master Garp. There is no one in this world who is not afraid of his old man's iron fist. After Cheng Cheng finished speaking, he then ordered Tuanzi, when you get to the Marine headquarters, don't forget to practice your sword every day, but you're not allowed to bully other people, you know? Ouch. I saw the familiar figure of my grandson, and I was about to step forward and give him a big bear hug, when I saw Tuanzi sitting on the side with a rather well-behaved expression. Thank you, Master. Master, you look like a real man. You are worthy of being my master's grandfather. Tuanzi took the big gold watch and put it on his wrist. Tuanzi stood up and whispered softly, Master, I am Master's great disciple, my name is Tuanzi. She's not a good person anyway, I don't like her. After hearing this, Garp, who was smiling from ear to ear, looked at Cheng Cheng unhappily and muttered, What does it matter if children fight? Can they be beaten to death? Tuanzi, just let your hands and feet go. With Master here, you can beat up whoever you want from the Marine headquarters. As soon as Tuanzi heard the king's name, he couldn't help but gnashed his teeth and said angrily, That old Dai Cobra is so bad. He doesn't even look at the great contributions you have made to their country, Master, and wants to expel me. He was expelled as soon as he left. He is not a good person like Princess Vivi. Dressed in a white suit, Garp arrived so suddenly that he didn't even put on his marine cape, which represented a lieutenant general. He came here in a dusty journey. Advertisement good guy, he has brought Cheng Cheng, Luffy, Ace and Sabo and several other naughty boys together since he was a child, but he has never seen any female dolls. Garp looked at the dumplings. He still had a sword on his waist? After hearing this, Cheng Cheng suddenly burst into laughter, rubbed Tuanzi's little head and said, Don't worry, Master gives you a guarantee. Cheng Cheng smiled quietly, also extended his little finger, and the two of them gently pulled the hook, completing the agreement that was not an agreement. Besides, this well-behaved female doll is so cute, and must be much more considerate than those brats like Luffy. I got it accidentally when I was chasing a big pirate in my early years. I put it on my hand because it looked pleasing to my eye. Because it was made of pure gold, I didn't want to throw it away. I always wore it on my hand. He grinned and took off the big gold watch, and handed it to Tuanzi without any explanation. What's your name, Tuanzi? This is a meeting gift from Master, take it well. I didn't prepare anything good for you in this hurry. I will definitely give you the best gift in the future. Cheng Cheng's smile changed and he asked, Why is Princess Vivi not a good person? She has never filed a complaint against you. As a marine hero, Garp, what is he going to do in such a hurry today? Listening to the sound of, Master, a wave of heat reverberated in Garp's heart, and he felt like his heart was melting at the sound of, Master. Garp was so anxious that he groped up and down his pockets, digging several times up and down, but couldn't find anything suitable. It wasn't until he blushed that he realized he was wearing a large gold watch on his wrist. That's good. Tuanzi nodded heavily, hummed, and stretched out his little finger. Garp chuckled and said, I know it well. Tuanzi pursed his lips and said stubbornly, Master, when I'm not around, you are not allowed to secretly look for Master's wife behind my back. Feeling the cool sea breeze, Cheng Cheng couldn't help but apologize to the king in his heart and also prayed, hoping that the king would not be hacked to death by Tuanzi in the future. Cheng Cheng, who was about to stand up to greet Garp, immediately sat back down and said helplessly, How long have I been away from Marine headquarters? Where can I conjure a daughter for you? Chapter 125 Intelligence. When Cheng Cheng heard this, he fell back on the stool and almost gave up the idea of leaving the dumplings here. However, after considering the absolute safety of Garp, he still insisted on his original idea. Knowing that persuading Garp was useless, he just gave Tuanzi a threatening look. Tuanzi immediately assured, Don't worry, Master, I understand. Garp, who only cared about being happy, could not think deeply about the meaning. He looked at the aura on Cheng Cheng's body that was restrained and rich. He had already seen that his grandson was special. Although his grandson is trying his best to hide his aura to cover up his true strength, who is Garp? He is an invincible strongman known as the Marine Hero, the man who once forced One Piece Roger into despair. The more Cheng Cheng hid, the more Garp was shocked by his grandson's growth rate. He squinted his eyes, looked Cheng Cheng up and down, and asked, You killed Lieutenant General Ghost Spider, right? Cheng Cheng sighed, spread his palms and said, I still can't escape your old man's eyes. I did kill him. Then what happened to Kizaru? That's not what he said to me in Sengoku when he came back. Garp was not shocked at all, but continued to ask doubtfully. Although it was unbelievable to kill a Marine lieutenant general, it was not impossible. But it was really difficult for such a Marine general to conceal the true situation and report false news. It's like reaching heaven. Although he had beaten Kizaru before he set off, Garp would never be so naive as to think that Kizaru would do this. Kizaru seemed to be a person who gives in easily, but Garp knew that deep in his heart, Kizaru he is an extremely difficult and ruthless character. Cheng Cheng smiled and said, It's nothing, it's just a deal between Kizaru and I. But I still have to tell Grandpa Garp, no matter what mistakes Kizaru commits in the future, don't kill him. Garp pondered his grandson's words over and over in his mind, but still had no clue, and his eyes became more solemn. Cheng Cheng was in a good mood and looked at the familiar Marine headquarters building, with two huge characters, Marine, written on it, majestic and majestic. Suddenly thinking of something, Cheng Cheng asked, has the Marine headquarters made any big moves recently? Have Akainu, Kizaru and the others been at the headquarters all the time? After Garp finished speaking, he looked at Cheng Cheng angrily, don't try to trick me, this is the Marine headquarters. Advertisement. Cheng Cheng's eyes were as gloomy as water. Sure enough, even after teaching Ace the breath of fire and a few fairy beans, Ace still couldn't escape. As for Marco and Josie, they thought they were here to help Ace. After all, Ace's identity is too sensitive. Tuanzi turned around, reluctantly waved goodbye to Cheng Cheng, and said loudly, Master, you must come and pick me up quickly. Kizaru, who was wearing a yellow striped suit, walked lazily, as if he was wandering aimlessly. He would greet Marines who passed by him politely. Although everyone has their own ambitions, when their own ambitions make the whole family become antagonistic, it is not so easy to figure things out. Now that he has signed a contract with Kizaru, he is not afraid of him having any other ideas. He knows that brother Kizaru is a smart man and a person who is afraid of death. After seeing the power of the contract, he will not act rashly. This time he come to find yourself, there must be something important. Even I can't protect you then, but after Kizaru walked over, a small white note appeared on the chair next to Cheng Cheng. Go to impel down. Cheng Cheng looked solemn and squinted his eyes. To be able to make Kizaru do this must be incredible information. In an instant, the small note turned into powder in Cheng Cheng's hands, leaving no trace, as if it had never existed in this world. Sitting back on the chair, Cheng Cheng couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness in his heart as he watched the two of them leave. Akainu and Aokiji just went out 2 days ago. I don't know what they were going for. I didn't hear anything else. Kizaru said helplessly. No, it's still early before get off work, let's come out and take a breath. In addition, if you meet Marine again in the future, you will kill him if you can, especially Marine's senior generals. It's okay that you haven't been discovered. Once you are discovered, it will be a life and death situation with the entire Marine. Most definitely. So Cheng Cheng just pretended to look at the scenery and waited for Kizaru's arrival. Advertisement. Cheng Cheng shouted a somersault cloud, and the somersault cloud in the sky immediately fell down. After stepping onto the somersault cloud, a cold light suddenly appeared in his eyes, which was extremely cold. You got off work so early today, General Kizaru? Marine passing by asked with a smile. Ace and Blackbeard fought in Verona Island for 3 days and 3 nights with no outcome. Akainu, Aokiji and Doflamingo have captured Ace and Marco and are on their way to impel down. Tuanzi, whose skin is getting whiter and tenderer now, said softly, Master, don't worry, my master has told me to be a good person, and I will never be a pirate in the future. Garp was stunned for a moment, his expression became gloomy, he sighed, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. He calmly picked it up with his fingers, and the note quickly fell into his palm. But they didn't know that this was a fatal situation set by Blackbeard and Marine together with Ace. Cheng Cheng even believed that there was a world government force behind it. In a good mood, Garp waved his hand and threw away those unpleasant things in an instant, and said with a hearty smile, Of course, my master has been stealing wine from those big pirates over the years. Kizaru continued to walk forward, as if he didn't notice Cheng Cheng sitting on the chair in front of him. After walking past Cheng Cheng, he didn't stop at all, like a stranger. Cheng Cheng opened the note with a calm expression and looked at the row of small words on it. Cheng Cheng chuckled, If you want to tell me this, Luffy, Long, Ace, Sabo and the others are already fighting to the death. Others Marine was obviously used to General Kizaru's fishing behavior, so he didn't try to expose it. After saying hello, he just smiled and went about his own business. Master, is there any wine? I want to drink, Tuanzi said with a smile. With that said, Garp ignored Cheng Cheng, let Xiao Tuanzi sit on his shoulders, and wandered towards Marine headquarters. Just when he was about to summon the somersault cloud again and leave, he saw Kizaru walking over with a calm expression. Garp suddenly laughed heartily, picked up the dumpling and let the dumpling sit on his broad shoulders. He laughed and said, Little dumpling is so good. Let's go back with the master. Just tell us what you want to eat. The master will give it to you. You make delicious food. Cheng Cheng smiled and waved, sighing, and finally sent the little girl away. He just hoped that she would not bully the other people in Marine too badly. Chapter 126. Ace arrested Impel the City. It is the world's first prison built on the bottom of the sea. It is located in the first half of the Grand Line. It contains extremely heavy and powerful prisoners. Ordinary cats and dogs are not qualified to be imprisoned here. 30 kilometers away from Impel Down City, a warship of the highest level in the Marine Corps rode the wind and waves, cut through the sea and sailed forward, and would soon enter the windless zone. As long as you enter the windless zone, it is an extremely dangerous sea area. There are no pirates here, but there are a large number of Poseidon species living there, which is an extremely dangerous existence for anyone. However, for the people on this marine battleship, entering the windless zone, their mission was basically completed, and their tense emotions could finally relax a little. At the bow of the battleship, Marine Generals Akainu and Aokiji stood side by side, the sea breeze blowing their white cloaks behind them. Both of them looked calm, did not speak to each other, and just looked at the sea quietly in front of them. Marines neatly positioned around the edge of the battleship stood with guns in hand, their waists straight, and their faces solemn, ready for battle. although they did not think that anyone had the courage to attack them at this time. But because there were two immediate superiors, some face-saving projects were still done, otherwise if those two saw it, firing them would be just a matter of words. In fact, this mission seemed extremely dangerous to them, but in fact, it didn't take much effort. On the contrary, it was much easier than many previous missions. Of course, these cannot be revealed. In the middle of the deck, there is a thick stone pillar made of sea stone. Ace was covered in blood and tied to a stone pillar with large iron chains. His clothes were shabby. He had been wearing a cowboy hat and he didn't know where he was now. The blood slowly extended along the deck, and the strong smell of blood was instantly blown away by the sea breeze. On the other side of the sea tower stone pillar, Marco was tied up. His body was covered in scars and one arm was still covered in ice. He looked even more miserable than Ace's fate. Advertisement Doflamingo, who was wearing a pink feather coat, squatted down, stretched out his index finger to dip a little blood on the deck, put it in his mouth and licked it with his tongue. His expression was extremely satisfied. This blood is really the best. The blood of the god of fire. I really want to tear your skin apart inch by inch. Doflamingo trembled and said excitedly. Ah, just thinking about it, I am almost excited to death. Ace was tied up and was weak. His left eye was a large area of purple and swollen, so much so that his eye turned into a tiny slit. He glanced at Doflamingo with disdain and sneered. Only you? I really don't know how you have such good physical strength. You were able to fight with that pervert Blackbeard for 3 days and 3 nights with no outcome. Even when we arrived, you still had the physical strength to punch a Kainu. Doflamingo smiled, not angry at Ace's arrogance. Although the two of them had not fought, he still recognized Ace's strength. Otherwise, Marine would not have gone to great lengths to lay out such a big plan at the headquarters, using the highest combat power of 2 Marines at once, and he himself was only responsible for preventing Ace from escaping in this plan. In fact, he didn't contribute at all this time. It was considered a business trip and he easily got a lot of credit. But what he was curious about was that although Ace was very strong, there was no need to do it to this extent, right? Between the two generals and himself, which big pirate would it be bad to catch? Why do you have to fight with Ace? How is he different? Could it be that the Warring States period was planning an all-out war with Whitebeard? If this is the case, there are many opportunities. Doflamingo looked at Ace carefully, trying to figure out something from some subtle details, but for such a long time, apart from knowing that Ace had eaten a Xiao Xiao fruit, there was nothing special about him. He continued to smile and said to Ace, is it because of Whitebeard that you are so confident? Do you still think he will come to save you now? To tell you the truth, it's impossible. You will be imprisoned directly in the great prison under the sea this time. I don't need to say more about where that place is. Once you get in there, no one can escape. And this time, your arrest was carried out secretly and will not be announced to the outside world in a short period of time. Whitebeard doesn't know where you are now. Advertisement, of course, not counting the golden-haired monster from before, he is an exception. Ace sneered. Since I was caught by you, this is my life, but you are not qualified to scream in front of me. Doflamingo chuckled, stood up, and without warning, raised his leg and stepped on the scar on Ace's chest. The pointed toe of his shoe pierced Ace's body like a sharp sword. If you are a prisoner and are about to die, don't be so crazy. No matter how powerful you are, if you are caught, it only proves that you are not strong enough. Ah, Ace screamed in pain, his forehead instantly covered with sweat. Aokiji, who was standing at the bow of the boat, frowned slightly and said displeased, you'd better be quiet. I know, Doflamingo was still very willing to maintain respect for General Marine. He raised his hands high, retracted his toes, took a few steps back and said with a smile. Marco, who was tied back to back with Ace, was in a daze. At this moment, he remembered Cheng Cheng's earliest letter. When he first saw it, everyone including his father laughed and didn't take it seriously at all. But later, when Cheng Cheng and the red-haired Shanks teamed up to board the ship, Marco realized the seriousness of the matter. It seemed that they had lived under the powerful shadow of Whitebeard for these years and had unknowingly become arrogant. So of course when he received the order from Whitebeard to support Ace, he set off immediately, without even having time to pack up anything, and finally arrived at Barone Island when Ace was dueling with Blackbeard. But not long after he arrived, Akainu and Aokiji arrived. When he saw these two people, he knew something was wrong. Just like what Cheng Cheng said, this is a fatal situation for Ace. He sighed and said in a hoarse voice, Ace, I'm late. If I could have come earlier, I could have taken you back. Ace smiled slightly. I don't believe Dad's order for you to take me back. He is a strong man and his dignity cannot be trampled on. And from the moment I joined Whitebeard's pirate group, I was destined to defend my father's dignity to the death. I once swore that I would assist Whitebeard in becoming king. Chapter 127. The blonde ghost-faced man Marco, the captain of the team known as Whitebeard's right-hand man, smiled in relief. He was naturally not afraid of death, but if the Whitebeard pirates lost him and Ace, it is undoubtedly a huge loss to the Whitebeard pirates, and I am afraid that the status of the entire Whitebeard pirates will be shaken by then. Thinking of this, Marco cursed himself secretly in his heart. As a 4 emperors, when would his father need his sons to worry about his powerful strength? Then he said calmly, then let us die together. Push City, 10 kilometers away. There is a light mist floating on the sea, like layers of light white gauze hanging in the air, making the view of the sea extremely poor. A group of golden clouds was suspended over the sea. Cheng Cheng stood on it and looked around the sea. It was quiet and there was no ship sailing over. Only occasionally would a Poseidon with huge tentacles come out of the sea, and then be stared at by Cheng Cheng, before silently sinking to the bottom of the sea. This position is already very limiting for Cheng Cheng. If he were to get closer to the pushing city, a fight would inevitably cause the strong men inside the pushing city to come out. At that time, once he was surrounded by Akainu Aokiji and the others, it was not certain whether he could escape, let alone save Ace. Cheng Cheng stood proudly above the clouds, closing his eyes and concentrating. He turned on his domineering power to the maximum range and stood there quietly waiting. Because he didn't know which direction the battleship pressing down on Ace was coming from, so he could only use this passive method. If the interception can be successful this time, a lot of things can be avoided in the future. It's a pity that time is urgent now, otherwise if Shanks is pulled over again, it will definitely be foolproof. Even though he can transform into the Super Saiyan state, but his time is limited, he can't guarantee to save people from Akainu and Aokiji, but he has no choice now. A white light flashed from his palm, and a green jade bottle containing the water of life appeared in his palm. Whether he could succeed or not depended on it. Suddenly, in his mind, a faint red light flashed and moved towards him. Cheng Cheng held the jade bottle tightly with his left hand, lifted the Genhai sword with his right hand, took out the long-lost Prajna ghost mask from the space ring, and put it on his face. He didn't want to reveal his identity too early yet. Cheng Cheng's eyes were serious, and he took a deep breath suddenly. His hair instantly stood up and turned golden, transforming into the Super Saiyan state. Advertisement: there were two marine generals, Akainu and Aokiji, on the other side's ship, so he couldn't help but look down upon them. Following the direction of Cheng Cheng's finger, the somersault cloud shot out at the fastest speed. A ray of golden light rushed quickly against the sea surface, breaking through the waves and leaving a long track on the sea surface. The momentum in front was astonishing, and the golden light flashed towards the marine battleship at an extremely fast speed. At the bow of the marine battleship, Akainu and Kizaru frowned at the same time. Akainu, one of the three marine generals, had a cold face, and the person in front of him had an extremely powerful aura. Even he did not dare to take it lightly and looked at each other with Aokiji. Let's be careful, it's not easy for someone to come. Aokiji could naturally feel the shocking momentum of the man in front of him, and said expressionlessly, no matter who he is, he must pay the price for his actions today. Let me come and meet this person first. Doflamingo, who was sitting at the stern of the boat eating melon, threw the watermelon away, stood up, raised the corners of his mouth, and sighed in disbelief. Does anyone really dare to hijack the ship? It seems that this guy is also a ruthless person. The expressions of other marine soldiers on the battleship changed, and they loaded their bullets and aimed at the golden light. The speed of the golden light reached 1,000 meters away from the battleship, but its speed did not slow down at all, and it rushed straight towards the battleship. Aokiji no longer hesitated at this moment. His right arm instantly froze, and there was a trace of white cold air. The deck under his feet instantly condensed with a layer of blue frost. He punched straight ahead and whispered, Fist of Frost. Above the sea surface, there was a huge frost fist in an instant, slamming hard towards the golden light on the opposite side. The seawater shook with an astonishing momentum. With the appearance of the big fist of frost, the surrounding temperature suddenly dropped sharply, and the seawater on the surface had a tendency to condense into ice. Cheng Cheng snorted coldly, and the golden sword light on Genhai's sword surged, reaching several meters in length in an instant, tearing the air. The frost fist grew bigger and bigger in his eyes. Cheng Cheng's eyes were firm and he swung out his sword without hesitation. Breath of water. Cut the sea. Boom. Advertisement: the moment the frost fist came into contact with the Genhai sword, a huge sound was made, the sea shook, and the battleship shook a little. The Genhai sword was blocked by the hard ice, and ice shards were flying. Cheng Cheng gritted his teeth and showed a ferocious expression, and used his arms again. The Genhai sword continued to move forward, and the entire 10-meter-long fist of frost suddenly shattered. With a bang, it exploded into tiny ice cubes and sank into the seawater. Aokiji was surprised when he saw how easily he blocked a blow that he didn't take lightly. At this time, he could also clearly see the golden figure, with golden hair standing upside down, but he couldn't see the real face because of the ghost mask. Aokiji flicked his wrist to disperse the ice cubes on his hand, and said calmly, If you dare to come, why do you need to wear a mask? I have never seen the pirate be so cautious. However, Cheng Cheng, who was covered in golden light, had no intention of responding to Aokiji. This clumsy way of provoking generals was really disappointing. Cheng Cheng stood proudly above the battleship and shouted loudly, Ace, don't care what I say later, just nod in agreement. Ace, who was tied to the pillar, looked up at the golden figure in the sky. He did not expect that someone would actually come to save him. When this person appeared, he felt a very familiar aura. But when this man came closer, he discovered that he had blonde hair and looked different from Cheng Cheng. Now after hearing Cheng Cheng's familiar voice, he was 100% sure of his identity. Ace was too weak to speak loudly, so he just nodded softly and said, okay. And it didn't matter whether Cheng Cheng heard his response or not. Marco, who was behind Ace, looked excited, but later regained his composure and sighed. Even with Cheng Cheng's strength, it is impossible to rescue us in front of the two marine generals. So Ace, if by chance, there is a chance later, don't worry about me, we can go one by one. Do you understand? I'm not kidding you? If our Whitebeard pirates were to capture two captains at once, it would be the biggest joke in the entire ocean. Ace hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. He looked up at his elder brother Cheng Cheng in confusion. When did he become so powerful? What has Cheng Cheng experienced these years? Chapter 128 Interception. Cheng Cheng, who was standing proudly above everyone at this moment, saw Ace nodding and knew that Ace had recognized his identity. He poured the water of life from the jade bottle onto his fingertips, took a deep breath, and said loudly, "In my name, I swear to you." Ace, who was tied to the stone pillar of the sea tower below, didn't think about what his elder brother meant at all, he just nodded in agreement. Just after saying the first sentence, 2 ice spears tore through the air and struck at Cheng Cheng like lightning. Cheng Cheng had no choice but to wave his sword to stop him and stop talking. With a flash of sword light, the 2 ice spears were cut off and shattered into pieces. However, the fragments of the severed ice spears did not fall, instead, they condensed in the air again, forming tiny ice blades emitting cold light like troops forming the formation. The densely packed ice blades first retreated some distance in the air, and then instantly shot towards Cheng Cheng like a violent storm. It was too late for Cheng Cheng to continue reciting the oath, so he raised the Zhenhai sword and swung his sword to block it. The huge Zhenhai sword quickly spun and danced in his hand, forming a watertight defensive barrier. Countless tiny ice blades were smashed into pieces by Zhenhai's sword before they could fly in front of Cheng Cheng, and evaporated and dissipated between heaven and earth. Akainu did not take action from the front of the battleship. He took off the white cloak behind him, clasped his wrists and looked at Cheng Cheng sternly, and said to Aokiji on the side, "I'm going to meet with this person. It seems like he should be able to stretch his muscles a bit today. Just keep an eye on those 2 people below." Aokiji was not a fighting maniac to begin with, and most of his actions just now were meant to be probing. Akainu was willing to stop this person, so of course he had no objection and nodded to Akainu. Akainu snorted expressionlessly, stood up from the ground, and instantly reached the same height as Cheng Cheng. He said coldly, "Sneaky villain, I have to tear off your mask today to see who you really are. The more you don't want others to know, the more I will announce your name to the world." How could Cheng Cheng answer such a boring question from Akainu? Taking advantage of this breather, he continued to shout loudly, "The stars will not fall, and the heaven and the earth will last forever. If I die, you will die. If you die, I will live." As Ace below nodded in approval, the water of life on Cheng Cheng's fingertips instantly emitted a dazzling golden light. Advertisement Cheng Cheng was overjoyed. As long as he carved 3 marks on Ace, the contract would be effective. Seeing that the ghost-faced man opposite him not only did not answer his words, but instead kept talking about boring things, Akainu also lost his little patience and said with sharp eyes, "No matter who you are, if you dare to appear here today, it is an unforgivable death penalty. So, go to hell." Akainu frowned and looked at the ghost mask in front of him with cold eyes. His right fist wearing a black leather glove suddenly clenched. In the center of the fist, a red light emerged, and black smoke rose. In an instant, fiery red flames erupted from his fist, mixed with black flowing magma, and thick smoke billowed from his right arm, exuding an extremely astonishing momentum. The flaming right arm suddenly swung forward, and Akainu shouted, "Big fire breath." The red flames on his right arm flew forward quickly, and the moment they left Akainu's body, they grew in the wind and transformed into a huge whirlwind of flames, with black and red magma intertwined in the whirlwind of flames. The surrounding air was instantly compressed by the scorching high temperature, forming strong winds that blew towards the sea below. Everyone on the battleship below felt a hot strong wind blowing through them, and quickly grabbed the guardrail around them to stabilize themselves. Shape. At the same time, they looked at the ghost-faced man with sad expressions. It was obvious that General Akainu's attack was unreserved. They did not believe that anyone could survive such a tyrannical attack. Cheng Cheng, who bore the brunt, undoubtedly felt the greatest pressure. He couldn't help but rejoice in his heart. If he hadn't transformed into a Super Saiyan, facing such a domineering blow, he would have been seriously injured even if he didn't die. But he is different now. Cheng Cheng sneered, "It's time for people in this world to know what a Super Saiyan is." However, while maintaining this state, he could clearly feel that his physical strength and mental energy were being consumed rapidly. He himself did not know how long he could maintain this state. After putting away the Zhenhai sword, he bent his knees slightly, put his hands on the paws on his waist, looked solemn and said softly, "Ka, Micah, sister, Ka." As he spoke, a blue-white energy ball emerged between his hands, and then expanded and exploded, flashing with dazzling light. Strong energy fluctuations reverberated into space, seeming to shatter the void. Advertisement then he suddenly pushed forward, and the blue energy ball burst out in his hand, forming a huge beam of light that collided with Akainu's big fire breath. Boom! The big flames collided with the turtle Qigong waves, causing an earth-shaking violent explosion, and circles of invisible shock waves spread out quickly around like ripples. Aokiji waved his hand on the battleship, and a thick ice wall barrier suddenly appeared above the battleship, blocking the shock wave. After the shock, many cracks appeared on the surface of the barrier. After casually removing the ice wall barrier again, Aokiji thought about this person's moves in his mind, but his mind was empty with no clues. However, around the battleship, which was not protected by an ice wall, a deep crater was blown out in an instant. The waves were stirred up to a height of more than 10 meters, and seawater splashed onto Doflamingo's cheeks. He stuck out his tongue and licked it, raised the corners of his mouth, and smiled coldly. When did such a perverted strongman appear? I really want to try it. Akainu and Cheng Cheng took a few steps back at the same time. After stabilizing their bodies, Akainu's expression became more solemn. There were not many people in the sea who could collide with him and not fall behind. So who is this person? Cheng Cheng also frowned after retreating tens of meters in the air. He could feel that his physical strength and energy were rapidly draining away. We cannot delay here, we must make a quick decision. I can't hold on much longer. Cheng Cheng's feet suddenly exerted force, and his body shot toward Sakaski like a golden lightning bolt. At the same time, he drew out his Genhai sword and struck him in the air with the blue water flowing behind him. Well done. Sakaski sneered, his arms turned into rolling lava and collided with Cheng Cheng. However, he didn't expect that when the blonde ghost-faced man was about to touch him, he suddenly changed direction and instead swept downwards. Akainu didn't need to remind him, Aokiji had already moved. He opened his mouth and let out a breath of cold air. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a snow-white ice knife and slashed at Cheng Cheng without hesitation. Cheng Cheng seemed not to notice, ignored Aokiji, and went straight to Ace. On the tip of the index finger, golden light shines. Chapter 129. A little bit. Cheng Cheng accelerated again like lightning, paying no attention to Aokiji flying towards him. He stretched out his golden fingertips and tapped Ace's forehead lightly. A golden light appeared on Ace's forehead, shining brightly. However, Ace ignored the changes on his forehead and shouted at Cheng Cheng at the top of his lungs. Hurry up. But before he finished speaking, Aokiji's ice blade stabbed Cheng Cheng's lower back. The white and cold tip of the ice blade pierced his body, and blood dripped onto the deck. Cheng Cheng didn't care about the coldness and pain in his body. He just wanted to light up a golden light again and stretched his index finger forward with all his strength. Ace's forehead once again had a bright golden light. At this moment, the captain of the second team of the Whitebeard pirates, his eyes were full of guilt and sadness. Thinking back to Cheng Cheng's various instructions and persuasion to him, he cried and his voice was hoarse. Go quickly, you will die. Leave me alone. I brought this all on myself. Cheng Cheng's eyes were determined, and he had no intention of answering Ace's words. A little. The only thing missing is the last thing. As long as you touch Ace, you can leave immediately and use the system to teleport away directly. No one can stop him. By then, there will be no need to even start a war on top. The sky is big and the earth is big, so the four brothers can be allowed to roam freely in the sea. Suddenly, Cheng Cheng felt a biting chill in his body again, and the blood in his body seemed to have stopped flowing. Another ice blade passed through his lower abdomen, and the two ice blades were crossed in his body, quickly exuding an icy cold air, and the temperature on the deck instantly dropped a few points. The white frost on the deck was spreading rapidly around. Marine, who was standing around with guns, couldn't help but shudder and tightened his clothes. But Cheng Cheng's body was getting colder and colder. He stretched out his left arm, and when he was about to touch Ace's forehead, the entire arm froze and stayed stiff in the air, and the golden light on the tip of his index finger dissipated. Cheng Cheng stretched out his hand forward with all his strength, but his frozen left arm was not under his control at all. For a moment, Cheng Cheng felt despair and his expression was gloomy. Advertisement: the only chance is gone. A little, always just a little short of that. Cheng Cheng suddenly became furious and cursed angrily. Aokiji, you ruined my life. After today, no one can stop the war. Aokiji twisted his wrist, and a burst of cold air spurted out. Cheng Cheng's feet froze instantly. He said calmly behind Cheng Cheng. War has always been there, and I, Kuzan, have never been afraid of any war. Cheng Cheng, who was in a state of rage, shouted loudly. His body glowed with golden light, and the ice on his body shattered in an instant, and he turned around and slashed at Aokiji with his sword. The sharp sword light shot out and flew towards Aokiji's head. Aokiji raised the ice blade in his hand and swung his sword to block it. Boom! When the sword light and the ice blade collided with each other, the sword light hit the sea in the distance, causing huge waves. I can feel your power passing away. An attack of this level cannot hurt me, Aokiji said calmly. Doflamingo, who had not taken any action, raised the corners of his mouth, revealing his white teeth. He opened his hands and his fingers shook rapidly and irregularly. Countless invisible thin threads quickly wrapped around Cheng Cheng. Cheng Cheng immediately felt the invisible restraints and knew that Doflamingo was causing trouble, but his current state was extremely weak. The Super Saiyan state consumed him so much that it became very difficult for him to just maintain this state. There was a muffled sound, and Cheng Cheng, whose feet and limbs were tightly wrapped, lost his balance in an instant, and his whole body fell to the deck. Ace's face was full of guilt, his eyes were red and he screamed. I'm sorry, I finally realize now that my own power is too small. I should believe you and shouldn't go to Blackbeard. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Blood flowed from the corner of Cheng Cheng's mouth. Feeling the overwhelming pain in his body, Cheng Cheng squeezed out a smile and said, Ace, it's not your fault, not to mention it's too early to say sorry now. Don't worry, I won't be caught by them, and I will definitely come to save you again in the future. All you have to do is smile and hold on until that day comes, and don't die easily, okay? Tears flowed from Ace's red eyes, and his voice was so hoarse that he could no longer speak, so he just nodded. Advertisement Doflamingo sneered, walked over, stepped on Cheng Cheng's head, and mocked disdainfully. You said you won't be caught. You are a prisoner now, okay? What's the point of being so harsh? Do you think you can escape from this situation? How naive. At this time, Akainu also fell from the sky, put on his cloak again, and walked over. He said coldly, there is a great prison under the sea just ahead, so we can lock them in together. Doflamingo, who was wearing a pink feather coat, sneered and bent down. Before that, let me see who this person is. Cheng Cheng, who was lying on the ground unable to move, sarcastically said, Brother Doflaming, are you waiting? I will remember you. Then he muttered silently in his mind, System, start teleportation immediately.
Uncle, where is the teleportation location? Whatever, the sooner the better.
Open black lens bracket yes, sir. Close black lens bracket. Doflamingo was just about to taunt the imprisoned blonde ghost-faced man at his feet when he suddenly felt his feet were empty and he stepped on the ground deck. It turned out that the ghost-faced man who was tightly bound at his feet disappeared out of thin air in front of everyone. Doflamingo swallowed silently and looked blankly at the place where the blonde ghost-faced man disappeared, at a loss. The invisible thin line he created was still lying quietly on the deck at this moment. Thinking that he had unknowingly provoked such a ruthless person, he scratched his head helplessly. Can you escape from this? It seems that life will be difficult in the future. Aokiji and Akainu looked at each other and saw the shock in their eyes. Akainu said solemnly, when I get back, I think I have to let the CP0 people investigate carefully. I must find out this person's identity. Otherwise, this person's ability is too terrifying. Aokiji frowned and said slowly, this teleportation ability is a bit like Trafalgar Law of the Hard Pirates. Is it possible that it is him? It's not impossible. Besides, even if it's not him, this Luo might be causing trouble nearby and helping the ghost-faced man escape. Akainu said slowly, then glanced at Ace again, and sneered. It doesn't matter if he escapes, our target this time is the famous Fire Fist. After Ace, who was sitting on the ground, saw Cheng Cheng leaving safely, he breathed a long sigh of relief and slowly closed his eyes. A relieved smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he sighed sincerely. You are still awesome. Chapter 130 Returning to the Old Place. Bardigo. The afterglow of the setting sun fell on the sea, illuminating the entire coast red, like a sea of blood. There was silence all around, even the sound of seagulls was very few. Suddenly, a golden light flashed over the coast, as if a hole opened into space. Cheng Cheng appeared in midair and fell straight down. Like a big lifeless stone, it hit the beach hard, creating a deep pit in the soft beach, causing water to splash everywhere. Cheng Cheng landed on the beach, and the shallow seawater just soaked his cheeks. Only his nose and mouth were exposed, and he could barely maintain normal breathing. His hair has returned to silvery white, and the Super Saiyan state was released during the teleportation process. Cheng Cheng instantly felt heartbreaking pain, but at this moment he couldn't care less about complaining about the system. With his head dizzy after being thrown down, he struggled and used up the last bit of strength in his body to stuff a fairy bean into his mouth slowly and with difficulty, and then when he wanted to drink the water of life. He felt a dizziness in his brain, huge pain in his body and strong sleepiness like a strong wind. The small jade bottle was just held in his hand, his head tilted, and he passed out. All that was left was the waves on the coast washing over and over again tirelessly against his body. At this moment, the lights have been turned on in the Revolutionary Army base not far away. The cadres in the conference hall did not have any urgent war matters today. They just gathered together to discuss some conventional combat plans and casually analyze the situation around the world. Half a month ago, their Revolutionary Army liberated a small country in the west. In that battle, the overall strength of their Revolutionary Army was obviously greatly improved. Everyone knows that this is because a small number of them learned how to breathing of water. Any soldier who has learned how to breathe water can fight 1 against 100 on the battlefield. Even those soldiers who have not learned how to breathe water have greatly improved their physical fitness. Kara, who had orange hair, suggested softly, can we consider gathering the warriors from each team who have learned water breathing to form a special force, and then send a top cadre to take the lead? Leader, in this way, we will definitely be an invincible army on the battlefield. As soon as Kara said this proposal, the eyes of the cadres in the conference hall lit up, and they all carefully considered the feasibility of this tactic. Advertisement Sabo stood against the wall with a water pipe in his hand. The water pipe in his hand rotated rapidly, bringing up waves of cool breeze. He thought for a while and asked, how many soldiers in the army have learned water breathing? Intelligence Control Officer Gildeo took a slow drag on his cigarette and answered directly. At present, the total number of ordinary soldiers in all the armies should be about 470. If non-commissioned officers are included, there are also 630. The number of people is still a bit small. Sabo shook his head and said slowly, although it is easy to form a breakthrough on the battlefield, it is also easy to be targeted by some truly strong people. It is better to be dispersed and hidden among various armies like now. This is more effective. Let the enemy lose unexpectedly. However, I think Kara's proposal can be used on key battlefields in the future. If the number of people is larger, it will definitely have an unexpected effect on the battlefield. Everyone in the conference hall thought about this and agreed with a smile. Yes, it's okay to be scattered in various places like this now. Once a fight breaks out, the other party may not even know how they lost. If 3,000 of our warriors can learn water breathing, once they are organized, they will definitely be a force that no one can ignore. I even think that such a team can directly occupy a small country. Immediately there was a burst of hearty laughter from everyone. Sabo smiled quietly and was about to say something when the door of the innermost office suddenly opened. Long strolled out, looked at Sabo and said, go to the east coast now and have a look. That boy Cheng Cheng seems to be here, and it seems that he is not in good condition. Sabo suddenly froze, put down the water pipe in his hand, and ran out without having time to ask any more questions. Sob, wait for me, I'll go too. When Kurla heard that Cheng Cheng was coming, she followed Sabo and ran out quickly. To her, Cheng Cheng was a great benefactor of their revolutionary army. And it must be a very bad thing to say something bad from the leader's mouth. Otherwise, given the relationship between brother Cheng Cheng and Sabo, Baldir would definitely come directly to the base to find them if he came, but now he is at the coast? That could only mean one thing. Brother Cheng Cheng's injury was so serious that he couldn't walk. Thinking of this, Kurla couldn't help but speed up, her body turned into a breeze, and she rushed forward eagerly. Advertisement: the two guards standing guard at the entrance of the base just felt two breezes blowing in front of them, and did not see clearly who was passing in front of them. Sabo and Kurla ran wildly, leaving a long dust trail on the ground. In less than 5 minutes, the two of them appeared on the eastern coastline one after another. The sun was already setting in the sky at this moment, and night was approaching. The sky was slightly dark, and the line of sight was not very clear. In addition, the location given by Long was very vague, so they could only find it based on their own feelings. Brother Cheng Cheng! Brother Cheng Cheng! Brother Cheng Cheng! The two of them shouted as they separated and looked for Cheng Cheng. After shouting for a while, there was still no sign of Cheng Cheng. Sabo's heart skipped a beat, and a strong bad premonition enveloped his heart. However, he still comforted himself in his heart. Brother Cheng Cheng's injury would definitely not be fatal. Otherwise, the leader would definitely take action himself. Just thinking about it like this, I suddenly felt something tripping under my feet. Looking down, I saw a familiar ghost-faced man lying in the water. Brother Cheng Cheng! Sabo's body shook violently, he shouted loudly, and immediately reached out to feel Cheng Cheng's breathing. Cheng Cheng, who was lying in the water, had already been awakened by their cries, but he really couldn't muster the strength to respond to them. When he saw Sabo put his finger on his nose, Cheng Cheng chuckled and cursed. "I'm not dead yet. Don't scream in so much pain. People who don't know may think something happened to me." Sabo let out a long sigh of relief. His legs softened and he knelt in the water. The cold sea water soaked his lower body. He smiled happily, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. "You scared me to death.